evening. We'll call a meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Hurst,
Present.
Attorney Murphy,
Present.
Ms. Naylor,
Present.
Ms. Gresham,
Present.
Perez,
Present.
Mr. Collins,
Here.
Mayor Sarno.
Present. Can we all please rise for a moment of silence for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag
Of the United States
of America and
to the republic
republic for
which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with
liberty
liberty
and
and justice for all.
for all.
somebody. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
To our viewers, and to all the school committee members and staff and families, I hope everybody's feeling well and healthy. Thank you for all your continued dedicated efforts. We'll now move into, and thank you, Focus Springfield. We appreciate your yeoman work and making sure that the public continues to get all the information that's needed. Just another situation. So we're going to move into informational discussion with Superintendent Warwick. A is to discuss the preliminary school reopening plan. Superintendent Warwick.
Thank you, Mayor. Purpose of the meeting tonight, as dictated by DESE, is to introduce the thought process of our district relative to how we're proposing reopening schools. We're not looking for a vote tonight. This is for information and discussion only. There'll be another meeting next week. We have to turn in an initial preliminary plan, which we'll do after tonight's meeting tomorrow to DESE. We got this plan about a week and a half ago, so we've been working on it since then. And to talk about it tonight. Next week, we'll propose the final plan to school committee, looking for approval. So we're still working on that plan. What we did was we put a pretty significant slide deck that we want to roll through tonight with you, going over what's transpired, where we're at, and our suggestion as to where we think we ought to be for opening. Also tonight, we put on an amended calendar for you for a vote later. The commissioner met with the union all summer, couldn't come to an agreement on most things or almost everything, but he did agree with the union to give an extra 10 days for planning and teams to work together before school opens. And he's proposed that for every district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So we're proposing we use those days, obviously, and a strong suggestion was everyone take advantage of those extra days because there's a lot of planning that's going to go into this process. So a few things we're going to go over tonight is the key themes we got from the state and their guidance, the guiding principles for planning, our reopening feasibility analysis, feedback we've got from our families. We've done two surveys, we're going to do one more. Proposed reopening approach, and then how we would work it with the teaching and learning and operations. And then, from the beginning, the commissioner said, have 3 different plans. A plan for full reopening, where we have all of our students come back. A plan for a hybrid, where we have a percentage of our students come back on certain days and do remote on others. And then a remote only plan. Because as the COVID piece switches and shifts and the infection rates either go up or down, the expectation was we could change plans. So hypothetically, you start one model, but it's clear rates are rising. You'd be prepared to go remote only because it's no longer safe because the COVID rates are rising. So again, our plan, our task for the summer was to prepare all 3 plans and then suggest by opening which plan we think would be best. So we're going to walk through that, and then that whole shifting piece, or as the commissioner said, it's pivoting. So the key themes out of the state guidance is to develop plans for fully in-person, as I just said, hybrid and fully remote, and be prepared to move quickly. The final plan, the one that requires a vote by school committee, is due August 10th. The commissioner's guidance again was prioritizing having as many students return to school as often as is possible. Particularly prioritize in-school instruction for our highest needs students, our ELL 1, our significant students with learning disabilities or special education. Emphasizing supporting, how are we going to support the social emotional needs of all of our students, and focus on keeping students and staff safe. So, the key elements in that are it's the mask wearing, the appropriate PPE, the 6-foot distancing, the frequent hand sanitizing. So we've already purchased millions of dollars of PPE equipment. Quite honestly, a lot of it with the mayor's support through a lot of grants, so it didn't have to come from our budget. So I'm grateful for that. We also got a big assist from the mayor. It was clear that with the chance of a lot of students being on remote, clearly that we wanted to go K2, a computer for every student. We had done grades 3 to 12 in the past. Again, the mayor, one of his grants, covered the K2 computers, so we're very well equipped. So I think we've already purchased over $5 million of taking care of needs, so we should be all set for PPE and all the kind of needs we need to make when we open up. One thing they strongly suggested, which makes a tremendous amount of sense, is minimizing transitions and mixing of students by scheduling, so that students typically would stay in the same room as much as possible the entire day, and where more than one teacher is required to work with a group of students, the teachers would shift into those rooms rather than the kids moving around the buildings. And again, the school year being reduced to 170 days to allow the extra planning time and PD we're going to need to open up with our teachers. Our guiding principles have been getting as many students back in as often and as possible, but making sure we keep kids safe. Our highest needs students, if we were talking about a hybrid model that was 2 days a week, we're trying to program our highest needs students so they could come in 4 days a week if possible. So again, those would be the low incidence special needs students, ELL number 1s, and our SLIFE students. Getting the students back to attend as regularly as possible and providing support for remote. Every student would have a consistent schedule, and we'd be focused, obviously, our priority for the in-person instruction would be the core subjects, ELA, math, science, and social studies, but we would be providing schedules for the students in all their subjects. Students would have virtual classes with their teachers on remote learning days. So if they were in a hybrid model and they were in school 2 days, they'd actually have teachers following up with them on the other 3 days and actually doing the lessons remotely. The remote plan we're going to be putting forward for following through on students who want remote instruction only, or on the days they're not in hybrid, is a much more robust plan than we were able to enact this spring when the commissioner came to an agreement with the union and put things in place just to keep kids going as best as possible. So this would be a much more significant plan because it's no longer an emergency shutdown, it's a long-term plan. And we have students checking in with an advisory crew or homeroom teacher every day, whether they're hybrid or remote, so there'd be that consistent support for them. We've engaged in a thorough reopening feasibility analysis. We've surveyed families. We surveyed families for the first time at the end of June. And unlike most districts where it was just a survey on the computer, we actually had staff from all the schools call every family. And we were able to get through to 15,000 families out of the 26,000. And the question was, if we come back and it's a fully hybrid, would you want to send your student to school, or would you want to keep them doing remote only? And what we got back from that is about 68% said they would return their child to school, and about 32% said they'd be interested in remote only. So we know, regardless of how we suggest to come back, and DESE absolutely is suggesting us absolutely allow students and their parents to choose remote only as an option. So we know about 32%. And every other district I've talked to has come back similarly, that it's in that 30% range where they wouldn't be coming back. And we need to meet their needs in a remote manner. We're going to do 2 additional surveys. One was done on if we had a hybrid, do we want a 2-day model weekly or a 4-day model every other week? And in surveying the parents, it came back 2 days weekly. So hypothetically, it'd be a Monday, Tuesday, a Wednesday for a cleaning and teacher collaborative planning, and a Thursday and Friday for group B to come back in, so there'd be that sanitizing between the 2 groups. We're also going to do one more survey now with the parents. We're going to bring back teachers and counselors to make calls to every family and say, at this juncture, based on our current information, how would you like your child to return to school? Would you want the hybrid plan that we'd be suggesting, or would you want a remote only? And either way, we would meet the needs of the students. We've also had a team of folks conducting some parent meetings to get feedback. We've also done a complete parametric analysis using all the information from MSBA. When we propose new buildings, they come in and measure every building we have, square footage of every classroom, space in every building. We took that and we looked at the number of students assigned to all 58 of our schools to make a determination. Could we bring back all of our students and maintain a 6-foot distance? What we clearly found out is we don't have one school where if we returned 100% of our population, we could maintain a 6-foot distance for students. Now, the commissioner suggested that we could consider a 3-foot distance, but it's not following the CDC guidelines. And we feel strongly that learning students with only 3-foot distance, especially when you're saying they're going to eat in the classroom, take the masks off to eat, wouldn't be safe. So that's why we went from giving up on the full reentry plan, because it wouldn't be safe, to going to a hybrid recommendation where we could, and we've done a complete analysis based on the 6-foot distancing using a hybrid model, we could return that portion of the population safely every day. And then we looked at staffing and scheduling options. We obviously have to schedule the students completely differently than we have in the past. Movement and get the Another piece we did analysis of all of our transportation routes, because right now we're looking at transportation, but the DESE guidance relative to transportation is again that distancing, so it's 1 student per bench. So on a sped minibus where typically we can fit 22 students, under this guidance we can really only fit 6 students. So again, we'd have to look at how we organize those buses so we can. And that transportation guidance from DESE took all summer to get out. So we only got that about a week ago. We're taking a close look at that now. So again, based on the hybrid, we're going to feed in what the parents want and take a look and say, how many kids can we return that qualify for transportation? But on the second survey, we're going to ask the parents, if you qualify for transportation, are you going to want your child to take a bus? We're doing the same thing with the students who take special ed transportation. There could be parents, and I think it's highly likely, who may qualify for transportation, want their kids to return, but not feeling the bus is the safest way and might want to drive them. So we're going to get that information and then see and program our buses so that we can meet the DESE transportation guidelines on those buses. So our proposed plan. So our proposed plan would be return to school using the 15 days we have up front. We're one of the few districts in the state that actually has 5 days before school opens. So we have 5 days of PD normally before the kids come back. Now we're going to schedule those extra 10 days for collaborative planning in the buildings to make sure that we have the kids return safely and the teachers are prepared to do the remote, hybrid, or what other options for instruction. So we'd have 15 days to do that planning between August 24th and September 11th. We're going to assign the kids to A and B groups. A would return on Monday and Tuesday. B would come in on Thursday and Friday. And again, Wednesday would be the day where the teachers would get together. So the teachers who are dealing with the students on hybrid and remote, the special ed teachers are working with students with regular ed teachers. Teachers will have time to do planning, PLC work, reaching out to the families that are engaging in remote support on Wednesday, and then the other group would come in Thursday and Friday. We've done a complete analysis of students who have siblings and students who have siblings in other schools. And I believe there's something like 13,000 siblings in other schools. So we fed that information in and we've assigned all the students with their siblings. So they'd either be in the A group or the B group. So the families would be going to school and be off on the same days. Students in low incident special ed classrooms in ELL, we'd have in a group C, and we try to return them on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, based on what we get from the transportation survey, if we can actually get them to school and home safely with a proper distancing. That would be our goal. And that would meet the DESE suggestion that we try to take care of our high needs kids. That would give us Wednesday for the teachers to do the proper planning that ought to be done. And it would give us a day for our custodians in between the groups to deep clean and sanitize so that when a different group comes in, we've taken care of that. So now we're ready to go to our CSOs are going to take over for the next piece of the presentation on teaching and learning. I think Shannon Collins is going to go on first, doing a lot of the elementary piece, and Kim Wells in a second. I'm going to turn over this section to them.
Thanks, Superintendent. In order to approach the teaching and learning with the hybrid model, obviously, as was previously stated, our students are going to be scheduled into a cohort of students based on the number of students in each of our schools, and within the school, how many students can fit within each classroom with a 6-foot social distance. Each cohort of students, as much as possible, will remain together throughout the course of a school day in the same room for each of their in-person days, so we can minimize transitions and prevent mixing of students as much as possible. At the secondary level, this means that each cohort will be taking the same set of classes, and of course, special education services and supports will be provided within the classroom as a part of this plan. Our students will receive in-person instruction in ELA, math, science, and social studies, as well as specials and electives on their in-person days. And every student will have a homeroom, crew, or advisory that will meet every day on both our in-person days and remote days. All classes will also meet with their teachers at least twice a week on their remote days to make sure that we're continuing to provide instruction and we're following up with our students on the completion of their remote activities on the days that they're not physically in the school. At the elementary level, obviously our students are going to be in 3 cohorts. Our group A's will come to school on Monday, Tuesday. Our group B's will come on Thursday, Friday. And our goal, if transportation makes this possible, is to have our group C students, our high needs special education students, and our level 1 ELs to be at school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. The chart below is what we created, and it reflects the number of minutes per core academic subject It really breaks down for you in a visual the number of minutes students will be engaged live for each of those content areas, the number of minutes they will be engaged remote, and it also breaks down the number of minutes that the students will participate in ELA and math on iReady. And we've reserved that for the remote days since it's asynchronous and something that teachers can certainly monitor and support when our students are working at home. What we try to do for the total number of minutes per content area is make sure that the number of minutes we're engaging them in instruction in this hybrid model will be exactly the same as it will be if we have to pivot to remote due to some changes with the COVID numbers, or if we're able to come back to school in a more full fashion so that we're making sure across all three models there's equity in number of minutes for instruction. Specials will occur on both in-person and remote days. And at the elementary level, if you're not an elementary person, those are PE, art, and music. So those things our kids really look forward to will be possible on both remote and live days. On both our in-person and remote days, our students who have EL needs and special education needs, their services will be met, whether they're working in school live or at home remotely by educators.
So with regards to secondary instruction on in-person days within all content areas, specifically the core content areas, we're asking that every student meet for at least 100 minutes, with 120 minutes being preferable over the 2 in-person days that they are in school per week. It differs a little bit with regards to children who've already met their graduation requirements of 3 years in science or 3 years in social studies. In those instances, they may have elective courses that they would be taking instead. On every in-person day, every home group, advisory, or crew must meet each in-person day for daily check-ins and for social emotional learning check-ins. And other courses outside the 4 core subjects, such as electives, will rotate among each of the in-person days. While students are working on their remote days, we will be asking that in all classes that every student have at least 2 virtual classes per week per class with their teacher on one of the remote days. This will allow for some flexibility for teaming and will allow for each of the teachers who works with that specific cohort of children to be able to develop a schedule where they can actually meet with each of their children without conflicts arising. For any class that is entirely remote, we're asking that students have at least 3 virtual classes per week per class with their teacher on one of their remote days. And again, all homerooms, advisory, and crew classes must meet with their teacher every day for check-in and attendance purposes. During remote days, students should have at least 2 graded assignments to complete per week per class, and 3 graded assignments per week for students working entirely remotely. And then again, as with the elementary level, on both in-person and remote days, all students will receive their English language services and special education services as required by their English language level or their IEP. With regards to teaching and learning and supporting our English learners will be prioritized by level and language need and will be placed into A, B cohorts or C cohorts, depending on their LEP level and in certain cases, their student growth percentile. So for our English learners who are level 1s, they will be programmed for up to 4 days of in-person learning and will receive their language supports from an ESL educator. For other English learners who are not level 1 students, they will be placed into AB cohorts and will receive their instruction by both an SEI endorsed educator, and they will also receive their ESL services. Schools will be providing ESL instruction whether the child is working in person in a remote setting or in a hybrid model. And they will also be provided with scaffolded instruction on the days that they'll be learning remotely. So regardless of whether or not a student is live and in person within the school, working in a hybrid situation or working remotely, they will receive their necessary EL services as dictated by their proficiency levels. And so now I believe we're turning it over to Dr. Marianne Morris.
Good evening, everybody. Consistent with DESE guidance, we are prioritizing our students with moderate to severe disabilities, which are that's calculated by their IEPs, and those are our students in our low incidence programs. For those students, we are hoping to program in-person learning for up to 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Services will be provided as indicated in their IEP to ensure a free and appropriate education, either through the push-in model or virtually, meaning that the SPED teachers will be pushing into those programs. Some of the therapies will be happening virtually. Any changes to the special education delivery model will need to be, as per DESE, documented and communicated to parents in their native language through the N1 process. The N1 process is simply a notification, a parent notification letter that goes out to the parents. Students with disabilities who are in this cohort C and opt for remote learning will be provided with a regular and consistent schedule of classes, intervention services, and therapies that are in their IEPs, offered either synchronously or asynchronously, and again, consistent with the IEP grids. We are definitely prioritizing the communication with teachers, staff members, and parents to make sure that there is optimal communication and participation. And it is certainly dependent on the whole transportation piece. I think that the superintendent spoke to the limitations on that. With regards to the social emotional learning supports, we are looking at, again, the meeting for the homeroom, the advisory, and the crew to meet with every student, either in person or remote, to focus on relationship building, supporting students with their social emotional needs. We are going to continue to provide the counseling services as prescribed in the IEPs and 504s. Again, most likely virtually at this point, to try to make sure that we are being as safe as possible with regards to interactions with people going into classes or students leaving classes. PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports, will continue to be used in support of both in-person and remote learning. That's all about culture and climate. We have a plan for that, and we have a plan for both remote and for in-person. The second step of social emotional curriculum will be implemented at the elementary schools. City Connects folks will continue to provide wraparound services, as well as a real kind of emphasis on reaching out to parents, talking to parents, troubleshooting, and overall support. Regular staff meetings are going to continue to be held to monitor student progress in both the academic and the social emotional domains.
Turn the next section over to Stefania on the academic piece.
So the next slide is about professional development, and during August professional development this year, all teachers will receive professional development on safety protocols for schools and in the classroom. They'll also learn how to use the learning management platform that is used to support remote learning. They'll be learning the hybrid learning model, which is new to us this year. They'll also have training on trauma-informed practices in the school setting, and have content-specific professional development on how to deliver the Springfield Public School curriculum in a hybrid format. This includes guidance on what instructional activities should be done while the student is in person and what lessons should be done remotely. Currently, resources are being developed and curated by teams of teachers in Springfield and the academic department to ensure that all of the teachers have robust content with videos of lessons that can be provided to students for remote learning days. Teaching and learning assessment. So there will be a district assessment calendar, and it is streamlined for the 2020-2021 school year to ensure the maximum time for instruction. The assessments will be taken from home and they will be valid. We're going to assign them as part of remote work to ensure that in-person instructional time is focused on interaction and instruction rather than assessment. So we want to spend as much time as possible in front of the students instructing them than spending hours taking tests. Priority assessments will be diagnostics to gauge student levels and ensure instruction is aligned to and differentiated for student needs. And we'll also be taking formative assessments to assess student progress throughout the year toward mastery of grade level standards. Currently, MCAS is still required at all grade levels for the 2020-2021 school year. Teaching and learning remote learning platforms. So during the spring, when we were closed, there was a number of software platforms that were being used by schools and teachers and to provide students and families with information or with lessons. This proved to be an enormous challenge for families, especially those that had students in multiple grades or different schools. It became challenging to navigate. So for the 2020-2021 school year, all teachers will be required to use a common learning management system for their grade level as follows. So in pre-K through 5th, we will be using Schoology, and in grades 6 through 12, we will be continuing to use Unified Classroom. Students will need to access numerous sites and resources when completing remote learning tasks, but all the activities, tasks, and lessons or assignments will be organized in these platforms so that the starting point for any parent or student wanting to know what needs to be completed on any given day can be found in these systems.
I think I'm going to talk about a little bit about how we're supporting student technology needs when they are on their remote learning days. And so we talked a little bit about this at the meeting at the end of June, but we will certainly be making sure that every student from K all the way to 12 has an SPS laptop. So as you know, we did a large distribution, but there were still students who either opted not to get a laptop or for other reasons didn't get a laptop. We'll be making sure that every student in the district has access to an SPS laptop at home for their remote learning work. I know that we've talked about internet being a continuing gap for our students and for our families. We are going to be working with Comcast to sponsor Internet Essentials for families who do not have internet at home. And we'll continue to use hotspots for those students who live outside the district because obviously different cable providers, we can't necessarily rely on Comcast for students living in other districts. We are doing training for a number of stakeholder groups, parent facilitators, clerks, attendance specialists, and also community partners. This is kind of a train the trainer training where we're helping these folks know how to answer really basic questions about the use of SPS technology. So when I say basic questions, it's things like connecting the laptop to wireless, restarting the laptop if you're having a problem, or logging into Schoology or Unified Classroom, the two platforms that Stefania talked about. And also, importantly, training about what do you do if you need help? Like, how do you get help from SPS if you're having technology issues? So the point of that is to have as many people in our community, both employees as well as community partners, who have awareness about how to answer some of those basic questions so that we can just get as much information out there to families as possible about how to use and get support with technology. We're setting up a YouTube channel, which will have videos covering a lot of the same ground: how to log into your computer, how to connect to Wi-Fi, how to log into the applications used in the Springfield Public Schools. Those videos, with thanks to Bay State Health for their translation office is helping us with this. We're going to have 7 copies of each video that we make. So we're going to have them in English as well as our 6 other top languages. So that YouTube channel is going to have those videos in 7 languages. And lastly, we are working with schools. So one of the things that I think is helpful about the additional 10 days is the opportunity to work with families prior to the first day of school. And so part of that outreach from schools to families in those first 10 days will have to do with just making sure they have what they need in terms of technology, like the laptop and the internet, and also any support they need in using it, making sure they're getting connected with that support. And then in terms of students who remain fully remote, so this is something that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education was very clear about, is that families have to have the option to stay fully remote for health reasons or other reasons if they aren't comfortable sending their child. So even in our hybrid learning model that the superintendent talked about, we expect to have students who are staying remote. And so this slide is really meant to just give high level, how are we supporting students who remain fully remote while others are coming to school 2 or 4 days a week? You can see they'll be in a cohort of students who are also all learning remotely. They will have the same homeroom advisory crew experience that students who are coming in person have. And those homeroom advisory crew meetings will happen daily. So that'll be the everyday opportunity for students to check in, get help, build relationships, just check in on well-being. They'll have assigned teachers who are serving their cohort. They will meet multiple times per week per class for virtual direct instruction. And then they will also have very specific expectations around learning activities and assignments. And I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie to talk about nursing.
Thank you. So as we've already heard, a focus of keeping students safe is for students and staff to have minimized the transitions and mixing of students. Therefore, one of the new protocols for nursing will be if a student is ill or needs to see the nurse, a staff member will notify the nurse and the nurse will go to the classroom. When the nurse goes to the classroom, there are options of care. The first one would be manage it in class if possible. So if it's a cut that's small, like a paper cut, an abrasion, localized bug bites, maybe anxiety, they can stay in the classroom with support and care from the nurse. The second option would be care that has to be moved to the nursing office. So that potentially would be wound care that can't be managed in the class, student that has to have diabetic care taken care of, or G2 feeding. And then the final one would be students that are symptomatic with symptoms of COVID. Those students would be moved to the medical waiting room, and at that time, a surgical mask and a face shield would be placed over the student's current cloth face covering. So the medical waiting room is separate from the nursing office. This is a room that we will have the students 6 feet at least distanced from each other in. And I mentioned that the mask and the shield would be on them, and the staff member assigned to that room will be donning and doffing their own PPE. So going over PPE, cloth masks are for all students in grades 2 and over, and the staff. But if a student isn't able to wear a mask, the exceptions would be for someone with a medical, behavioral, or other challenges. Then the next option would be face shields, which staff would have access to if they're in increased risk of splash or spray of any type of body fluid due to contact with students, and they can't maintain 6 feet. And again, we could also use them on students with special needs that couldn't have a cloth mask on. Gloves are to be worn anytime. This isn't new in contact with body fluid. What is new, you would put gloves on anytime you have a COVID suspected symptomatic student, and also when using disinfectant cleaners. New will be transparent face masks. They're to be worn by staff that are working with students in kindergarten, first grade, ELL, speech and language pathologists and assistants, and staff that are working with hearing impaired students and students who are hearing impaired. The transparent mask allows hearing impaired to lip read and children learning to read to see the mouth form in vowels and words. We will have disposable masks available in every school for any student or staff that arrives without the cloth mask. Required PPE for nursing and staff covering the medical waiting room is the KN95, a face shield, gown, and gloves. All staff are going to be trained on donning and doffing their PPE. And the next area that nursing will be involved in, if a school is notified that a student or staff has tested positive for COVID, the school nurse will first determine the date the symptoms were onset of the student or staff, determine if the student or staff attended school or worked while symptomatic, and then if they worked 2 days prior to the symptoms began. To determine close contact, the nurse is going to follow up in the school for the student and staff member based on assigned seating charts that all classes are going to have, scheduled bathroom breaks or sign-outs, daily attendance on the bus, a review with the school of any other potential exposures during the time they were in the school. The school nurse will notify Springfield Health and Human Services for guidance of a positive test result in the school. The school nurse will also notify the family of students and will talk to staff of potential exposure. They will either do this by phone or letter while maintaining confidentiality. And then the school nurse will follow up the staff and family to make sure they have reached out to their physician for the requirements of testing. Oh,
Next, this is Pat.
This is Pat.
Pat, so,
Pat Roach.
and that road trip.
School, I can jump right into it. So operations building access. So one of the things we want to do with our building access protocols is very much reduce the amount of visitors and unnecessary people coming into the buildings as much as possible. So to the extent possible, we're going to set up different doors for entering and exiting the building. Following public health guidelines, we'll have everything marked appropriately. Visitors to schools will be limited by appointment only, and it's going to be very minimal. So parent-teacher conferences, we're going to be doing those by Zoom or some other virtual means, and IEP meetings will be done through Zoom also. Staff, prior to entering the building, are going to certify that they're symptom-free. Our regular external partners, for example, AmeriCorps, student teachers, they'll follow the same safety and entrance protocols as our staff. Outside clinicians will be providing their services remotely. So if you're a speech pathologist, rather than visiting the student in the school to provide those services, they'll be doing teletherapy to reduce the amount of people and bodies inside our buildings. Out of school time providers will be working with our students remotely as well. So Pat Sullivan and his team have been working really hard on the facilities. So we're going to be maximizing ventilation in all of our buildings. Our classroom windows are going to remain open throughout the day in any one of our buildings that have the windows that open. Kitchen exhaust fans are going to run 24/7. What that does is it creates negative pressure in the building, and it forces fresh air to come in through any of the open windows or anything that's open in the building. All of our HVAC systems have been checked and they've been repaired, and everything's going to be working prior to the first day of school. We are in the process of upgrading all of our air filters in the district to MERV 13 or better, and those are the air filters that actually filter out viruses. So we found a company that actually custom makes the MERV 13 filters, and the facilities team's going through and actually changing some of our HVAC equipment to allow these much thicker filters to fit in. And then any fresh air intakes with HVAC systems, we're going to have them running constantly whenever the buildings are occupied. As far as bathrooms go, any hand dryers, we're going to have them shut off, and we're going to replace them with paper towel dispensers. That way the hand dryers don't actually blow the germs off your hand and spread them around. Any bathroom exhaust fans, they're going to be set to run constantly all day. We're going to continue to disinfect the bathrooms throughout the day, And we're going to not allow any of the bathroom windows to be open because that's a best practice, ensuring that you don't have the germs come out of the bathroom and into your school. So there'll be no drinking from the drinking fountains. We will make sure we have water bottle filling stations in every school. There's going to be a plexiglass window in the main office of every one of our buildings. Right now, signage is being installed on social distancing and hand washing. And hand sanitizing dispensers are being installed in all classrooms and through common areas of the schools. And then Pat Sullivan, who's on the call right now, is meeting with an industrial hygienist next week, and they're going to be reviewing all of our plans and ensuring that all of our buildings are safe to open. So they'll have certified that before we have any staff back into our buildings. Our custodial team right now, all the school cleaning plans are being updated with a focus on cleaning high touch areas such as door handles, railings, and anything people would be touching, multiple people would be touching. Classrooms, we're going to minimize classrooms being used multiple times a day, but if we have a preschool where there's an AM and a PM, they will be cleaned and disinfected between the two classes. Or if you had a science class, that we're going to minimize the amount of kids going into a science class, but if we had an AM and a PM session, we would do the exact same thing. All schools and classrooms will be cleaned and disinfected every night. And then where we're doing the A cohort and the B cohort, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, we're going to use Wednesdays to do a very thorough deep clean and sanitation of all of our schools.
Can I Pat, mention industrial hygienist? It was very, very good, quite successful in the medical triage tenting we set up to be proactive dealing with our vulnerable homeless population. It paid huge dividends. We kept really in the single digits, and as far as the cleaning, we've been able to, on our buildings and all our first frontline providers from police, fire, to many of us, and inspectors, and you name it, we did very well, knock on wood, to preserve and protect our workforce. That went well. So some of these things that we've done have paid dividends, and we're looking to do the same thing for all our students and children, families, and the Springfield Public School system staff also. So these are things that we have done that have been successful in order to follow up on public health, medical, and science guidelines. But we've done them, and it's paid dividends with the services we put forth. Individuals and departments that have continued to work throughout COVID-19. I just wanted to interject that on that. Thank you.
And Pat Sullivan was very, very helpful.
That was fantastic.
Helping us.
Pat and Summer, Helen Culver.
Incredible. Been a great team process, but this industrial hygienist worked with us in the tent, and Pat's going to have them certified that every building is ready from a ventilation standpoint for us to return. So that's something that will also help reassure parents and staff that things are safe.
Yeah, our goal is to have the information by the end of next week to you, Danny, and the mayor.
And Pat, if that's Pat Director Sullivan, you broke up a little bit. If you could repeat that.
No, it's our goal to have that information from the industrial hygienist over to Danny, you, Mayor, and to Pat Roach by the end of next week.
Thank you, Director Sullivan. I just wanted to get to the school committee members and the staff and the viewing public that these are tested and true strategies that we've already used within the first, now we're in our 6th month, that have proved beneficial. So, we're pulling out all the stops, but again, any decisions made by myself, Superintendent Warwick, our school committee members, is going to be based on public health and safety and medical and science type aspect.
Pat Sullivan, John Carrigan, the whole facilities team have been incredible, and they've been working tirelessly all summer.
Yeah,
to get us in good shape.
Director Sullivan, Commissioner Helen Colt, Health Commissioner Helen Colt,
And the health commission's been with us through the whole thing.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Hey, no problem there. So
Had our issue with the food service. Too many.
So as far as our plans for food service, we'll be eating breakfast, and students will be eating breakfast and lunch in their assigned classrooms. So the good thing with Springfield is we've had a great breakfast in the classroom program for years now. So we're just going to copy and paste it and do the same thing with lunches. So we're not expecting too much of a transition there. Something new we're going to be doing is we're going to be able to, the orders are going to be done electronically, so the students won't have to go down to the cafeteria to order their food. We're developing a system so they can order their breakfast and lunch electronically. All the food that gets delivered to the classroom is going to be pre-packaged. That is a mandate and best practice right now. And we just finished buying a $350,000 piece of equipment we received a grant for. And it's going to allow us in the culinary center to have top of the line prepackaged food that we're going to be able to get to the kids. Disinfectant wipes and trash bags will be provided to every classroom. The bags, roster, and trash will be placed in the hallways after the meals are served, and the custodians come right around and pick them up. Students will be able to remove their masks when they eat, as long as they're at least 6 feet apart. And our classroom spacing plan right now is to have all of our students 6 feet apart. Something new we're going to be doing is we're going to be planning an evening distribution at 17 sites. We just started it and like kind of piloting it now, but we're going to be distributing meals in the evening. So in case families are working during the day and the students are home remote, this way we can get to as many families as possible and make sure they have access to their healthy meals. So between 4 and 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays. And then meals for the 3 days when they're not in class, we're planning to try to distribute when they leave the building. We're still working on that system, but they'll be available to be picked up for parents.
Just to compliment the team before we go on to transportation, since school closed, we're up to delivering 1,900,000 meals. Yeah. So we'll be over 2 million before we reopen schools. So incredible job by Zexo's team and our team under Pat Roach. Incredible.
Yeah, we had a really good summer when it came to the food service. So transportation. So DESE just released their guidelines last week. So transportation, which is probably the most important thing, that's the linchpin for accomplishing almost everything we talked about today. The guidance just came out, unfortunately. But that being said, we were kind of on top of almost everything that was being recommended, so there was nothing that was completely shocking other than being held up for moving forward. So we're going to have extra disposable masks available for if a student shows up for a bus and they don't have a mask, we'll have an extra disposable mask available so we don't have to turn them away and they don't get on without a mask. We're going to provide our bus monitors with PPE. We came up with a system to make sure we know the attendance on every single bus every day. And that's for contact tracing purposes that Jeannie Clancy was talking about earlier. This way, if a student is infected and we find out, we can go right to the bus and get the bus roster and pretty quickly know who might have been exposed. As far as loading and unloading the buses, we're going to fill the buses from the back of the bus to the front of the bus. That way students don't cross each other's paths. And then when they leave the bus, we're going to, have the students leave from the front to the rear. And then all the seating assignments on the bus will all have an X. And what it'll be is there'll basically be one student per row, and then they're going to alternate whether they're window or aisle between every single row. All of our vans and buses are going to be disinfected after every trip. We already have a plan with the vans to do it, and we're working with the bus contractor on the buses. First student is exploring a product that they believe keeps surfaces disinfected for 30 days. So we're working with them to figure out the best way to handle those buses. And then our plan is to have all the windows on buses remain open as a best practice during those trips, whenever weather's permitting.
That really is going to shift in this presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent. So as the superintendent spoke about in the beginning of this presentation, and per DESE guidelines, we were required to put together 3 different plans. One that we've been kind of speaking about has been the hybrid model, which includes both in-person and remote learning for our students. What we want to ensure everybody is that we will be totally ready based on what we are doing right now in the hybrid learning, the expectations that we have for the remote days. We will be fully ready to shift to a remote learning should we need to. And so with the remote expectations that we are developing, they will guide us in both the hybrid model and if we go fully remote. And so the resources that Stefania was speaking about earlier that are being developed for the hybrid learning, the instructional videos, the readings, and all the other contents, those are being designed to cover the entire curriculum, the entire year. That means that if we do have to go fully remote, our teachers and educators will have everything they need to fully be able to shift over to the remote learning. And another thing that we want to remind everyone is the attendance. As of right now, we will be taking attendance, whether we are in the hybrid model or in the fully remote learning. We will be tracking students and their attendance. We will also be fully prepared to go fully in person, should we be able to do that. And once we are cleared by the CDC and by all our government agencies, we will have our schedules ready for our students so that our students can come back to school in a fully in-person learning model that will have their schedules already ready and everything else. And so part of what we've been working with on all 3 of the plans is to ensure that we have everything ready for the students should we have to switch from one model to the next at any given moment. And so, for example, if an A group student is attending school on Mondays and Tuesdays, we will have their Wednesday, Thursday, Friday schedule ready to go with some of those classes that they've been doing fully remote or in person. Superintendent, back to you.
Thanks, Lydia. You know, that's a very, very important piece of the process because from the beginning, the commissioner has emphasized to us the ability to get ready for 3 possibilities, either fully re-entering, a hybrid, which is a mix of the 2, or remote only. So should the infection rates change, we're ready to pivot, and we're ready to pivot immediately. That's why all summer, and actually starting in the spring, we had our reopening team meeting back in the spring. We were looking to be ready for all 3 possibilities. As I said earlier, after we did our feasibility study, it's clear to us that full re-entry was not a safe possibility because the students would be less than 6 feet, and we thought we should follow CDC guidelines. Hence, us suggesting at this point, we think the best option is for us to continue to try to move towards opening with a hybrid model. Now again, should infection rates shift or something happens relative to ventilation in buildings or something else, we'd be ready to move to another model to protect students at a moment's notice. But at this point, based on our work, we've concluded that the hybrid model makes no sense. We surveyed families that said if you were in a hybrid model, there were several different options, but the 2 main options that I see in the state, and most of the folks in the state have gone with the option we're suggesting, is an A group on Monday, Tuesday, an B group on Thursday, Friday, the C group on 4 days for the high need students, and Wednesday for the deep cleaning in between. We surveyed our parents on that and offering that or a possibility of every other week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for A group, and then the next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for B group. And the results came back 73 to 27% for the 2 days a week, so we'd have weekly engagement with the students, so it would make the remote work more powerful. Our team feels that's the best model anyway, and that was what our parents strongly suggested. So that's our recommendation to you at this juncture. And again, I think we have to watch the rates because school opening is going to be over a month away, a month and a half, 6 weeks away, and be able to shift as they go. So that's our recommendation to you right now, that we're going to continue to plan hybrid, and we're going to bring a plan suggesting that that would be where we're at next week to reopen. We're not expecting to vote tonight. We wanted you to have time to digest the presentation, and we'll be presenting the full comprehensive plan that Desi suggested to you next week, completed. Again, I apologize for the tight timelines. These were Desi driven. They were not something we came up with. All their guidance has come out very, very late. It's been an extreme challenge for all the districts in the Commonwealth. I will tell you, I've talked to the superintendents in Chicopee, West Side, Springfield, many of our suburban towns, Worcester and Boston, and they're all recommending this hybrid 2-day format as the best opportunity for those districts. So that's happening a lot throughout the state. There's only a few school systems we know of that can do full reentry, but they must have a tremendous amount of building space to spread the students out, which again, we looked at, but we just don't have. So hence our recommendation to you. But again, not expecting a vote tonight, just for you to think about.
We'd like to, school committee members, please, I'd like to open it up to each and every one of you. Any questions or comments you might have before we move to the second portion of the meeting. And thank you for your due diligence and listening to the whole presentation. First, it's pretty detailed, so we're ready to go on on 3 type of work, really 2, because I right now, there's no way that we're going back full tilt. We hope and pray for that day as soon as possible, because it's extremely important for our students and the socialization and the hands-on learning. But we want to do that, making sure that students, the staff, and families are totally protected under public health, science, and medical. So
last thing before we open, I just want to mention this one more time. So any parent who feels their child shouldn't come back in person at all, they have the option to go remote only. So any parent who's uncomfortable, they're going to let us know, and their student can stay remote only, and we'll service them. So just wanted to emphasize that.
That's important, because I spoke to some parents today that returned their calls, and they wanted to know if that would be an option, or if things were progressing well, could they at that time jump back into school. And so we're trying, the superintendent being very, very flexible. Vice Chair Collins?
I'm just going to make a suggestion that maybe we have Patty call everybody by their seat. We're not going to vote, but just to say if they have any comment on whether the department should continue in the planning method that they're doing. Any positive or negative comments. They put a lot of work into these plans. Should they continue down that path? So I'd like to have everybody have a chance.
Yeah. The floor is yours, school committee members. Ms. Gresham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Superintendent, thank you very much for the explanation of this. I attended last Thursday, MASC had a meeting regarding reopening. And one of the things they stressed is that school committee as a body should be definitely involved in the preliminary portion or discussion of this plan. We weren't involved in this.
That's what we're doing tonight. That's what we're doing.
But I mean, before this, I feel that we should have been involved in this before. We haven't had any public meetings. There was no parents on the committee, reopening committee. There was no school committee member on the reopening committee. There was no teachers. And I think that's important for them to be a part of this, to understand what we are doing and that we want to reopen safely as possible. But there was no, it was just your staff, superintendent, who is largely composed of people that don't look like the makeup of this district, the student body.
So we met with the union every week, and the union had input all along in this plan. So the union, the leadership of all 3 unions have been meeting with us every week since March and all throughout the summer for input. We've asked every family 3 different times what they're looking for. So we sought out a lot of input. The DESI guidelines on the timing of this meeting and how it was going to be conducted was given to us by DESI. Yes, it did come out late. We did not control that.
And they also discussed in this meeting that this preliminary plan or a feasible study is due tomorrow to DESI.
This preliminary plan is due tomorrow. That is the regulation.
And we had no input. We as a school committee body had no input in this. I'm very disappointed in that.
We're meeting tonight.
Extremely, but still, we should have been involved before tonight. We are involved. You're involving us in the 11th hour. Hold on, just hold on. You're involving us in the 11th hour. There's still some unanswered questions. Still some unanswered questions. There has been no meetings. You was on Focus Springfield once, and you said there will be a school nurse in every school. Is that true?
We have a school nurse in every school.
In every single school?
Yes. Absolutely.
All right. All right. Okay.
I just, this question that the administration has put across a plan. It was very short notice for our review and our input from the specialists putting it across, and then the review and input comes at that point in time. So they put a very comprehensive plan together, and obviously the school committee is going to have say and input in that, but there had to be a base foundation groundwork put together in a very short period of time. So I don't think there's been any type of disrespect.
I feel that it's been disrespectful. I do.
Well, I apologize to the school committee for the timelines, but again, they were DESI dictated by us. But I do think the timeline.
There should have been some public meetings for parents to hear what the plan is and explain to them. They do not want a robocall to say, do you want this or want that? Press this number, press that number. That's not what they want.
We're going to have.
I see, hold on. I see where you said that, and I'm quoting this, at the request of the school committee, the district is surveying parents via robocall regarding 2 possible hybrid models. No one ever asked me my opinion about the hybrid model.
Well, that suggestion came from a school committee person, so we followed it as another step.
What came up? Say that again, Superintendent, I'm sorry.
That request came from the vice chair, so we get more parent input, so we did it.
But the vice chair is not the body. He is only one person. He can't make a decision for us as a body.
Well, it wasn't, number one, it wasn't a school committee decision. And I did talk to some members. I believe I reached out to you saying we.
No, you did not. You did not.
Can I finish?
Sure.
Thank you. We did have a discussion where we said we need more parent input on what they're thinking about sending their children in a number of days. And one of the ways to do that would be a survey. You and I did have that discussion.
No, hold on, Chris. You and I was talking about something else, and we mentioned 3 feet and 6 feet apart. That's the only thing. We did not talk about a hybrid model. No, we didn't. And I'll argue the point. We did not.
I do think in subsequent past school committee meetings, there was discussions about 3 things, about if we could go all back in, 1, be prepared to go remote if we had to, and then the third version is the hybrid version. But I think before the short notice from DESI, before you go public with everything, you can't just throw that and say, geez, what do you like? What do you like? You like this, you like that? There's got to be a foundation plan put together from the experts saying, this is how we look at it. Once we were given designation from DESI, which came very, very late, everybody's going to have an opinion. Everybody can have an opinion, but we're trying to base it on facts. So I think this was pretty entailed on all different versions of it, and now, we're rolling it out.
If I could finish what I was saying, I didn't make any decisions for the committee.
No.
I think we're saying one of the options that we may have to consider is a hybrid model. And I said I would like the school committee to have information from how the parents feel about a hybrid model and two different methods of doing it. This was just to gather information to be given to the school committee so we'd have more information when we discuss and make our decision. We also talked about, I would like us to hold, well, it's the next, I'll wait till it's next item on the agenda.
Yeah. And then just to let you know too, as far as Massachusetts with Governor Baker, and as far as the city of Springfield, knock on wood, we have been commended how all of us have been handling the situation and the proofs in the pudding with the numbers we're getting staying in the single digits. So being proactive, putting across a plan first on how we would handle all these situations. So when we do the continued public outreach, people could say, this A, B, C, D. Oh, okay, I didn't realize that. Get all the information out there, get the viewpoints, but go out there and say, let's just throw it against the wall and have people say, let's do this, let's do that. Base it off the experts. That's what we've done throughout this COVID-19. I know on the city side and on the school side, and knock on wood, I hope it continues to pay dividends. So, but everything's on a tight frame, and everybody's opinions appreciated. Gresham, I look forward to yours.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gresham. Go ahead.
Gresham might still have the floor.
Go ahead. I'll jump in later. Go ahead, Ms. Naylor.
May I proceed, Ms. Naylor, when we're done?
Okay. Ms. Naylor?
I definitely agree with Ms. Gresham about making sure that the public has more input and knowledge as far as what's happening. And I did personally request that we do have a public meeting, and I did ask if we could have a virtual town hall similar to what a lot of other districts are doing, because it is important for folks to know that we are making every effort. So I do know that surveys have gone out. I missed every time they called me, so I never got a chance to participate in a survey. But one of my kids' school never contacted me at all. And so I know that just as being a parent, that all of the parents are not being contacted as we are being told that they are being reached out to. So that's concerning for me to be on the receiving end as a mom and know that I have not been reached out by some of my kids' schools or staff. So I just wanted to say that, so that we are documenting and aware that even though staff may be telling us that they're reaching out to families, I don't know that that is exactly true, that they're reaching out to families in the way that they're saying that they are, or that they're effectively connecting with anyone. So I think that having some type of public forum will give people an added opportunity to be able to converse, to be able to share, to be able to ask questions, because if not, we're not doing our due diligence to respect the wishes of our community. And I think that oftentimes the squeakiest wheels get heard, and I want to know from people who have to deal with this every day, who have kids that are at risk of going out to the schools, what do they want to do, and what do they really feel about what we're tentatively planning to do. And a number of family, I have people on one extreme reaching out to me saying, absolutely not, my kids are not going back to the school. And I have other extremes where people are saying, yes, I want them to go back as soon as possible. They need to get back into their normal routines. And so that's my comment as a mom first. But my concern is that as we all, and I don't think anybody will argue this point, the way that school ended was really, it was unacceptable. And it wasn't our fault. So I'm not saying it in a sense to blame anyone. And it was abrupt, and we did not plan. Nobody ever planned for this unprecedented pandemic to happen. So I'm not saying that in a way to blame or offend anyone. But I think my biggest concern is what is virtual going to look like. We talk about asynchronously and synchronously, but we don't have percentiles as to how much of that will be which of those. And then we also talk about checking folks and making sure that folks have to certify that they've done X, Y, and Z. Are we doing temperature checks? What are we doing to certify on our end for liability purposes that folks are in fact at least asymptomatic, you know, as best as we can assume. But that's another concern. If folks don't show symptoms and they're carrying the virus, then we can be doing some of everything to protect and end up with a situation like one of the recent hospitals where people were exposed and a number of folks were infected. And so I don't know what the right reason, what the right, not reason, but the right step is going to be, right? Because we still have to look at data and all of that. But what I can only imagine just by looking at my own household, what student engagement looked like, what student participation looked like, how many kids actually got credit for their courses versus those who said, who cares if I finish up, I'm probably going to pass anyways. So it's just, and I hate to even be, I'm pulling in so many different pieces because I know we only have so much time to discuss this, but as I look at my notes, I feel like it's still scattered. I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of concerns. And I don't feel that even though the model looks as if it is trying to identify theoretically what we should do, practically, I don't really see this being something that is going to be able to happen in an effective and safe way. So I'm very, very concerned. Although I know you got to submit what you have to submit tomorrow by the deadline, I'm just very concerned that we still don't have enough feedback from folks as to what they really feel safe doing and want to do or think is best. And we don't have enough input from folks who have to be at the grassroots or ground level to tell us what their experiences are going to be or what they're afraid of, so that we can be careful to consider all of those things when we make a final decision. So I'm going to be quiet at this point. I have one last question about the IEP. You talk about kids going into groups. How do we identify which kids are going to be in that group C? And when will families find out whether their kids are in A, B, and C?
Thank you, Ms. Naylor. Ms. Hurst?
Thank you, Mayor. So my hope is that we're not going to have to rush through this meeting. I understand that the superintendent's team has worked really hard on putting together this proposal, and I really do appreciate that. But I do share the same sentiments as Ms. Naylor and Ms. Gresham in that we are getting this information in the 11th hour, and I know that I too have a lot of questions, and I know that you have a deadline to meet. So it's my hope that first and foremost we'll be able to state some opinions, but also get some answers to our questions. Because I too have 2 kids that are in the district, and I did get a call in late June about what I thought I was going to do with my kids. But I did not necessarily get presented with a specific option, right? Because at that moment or at that time when that inquiry was made, my principal didn't know exactly. You know, there was thoughts about what the 3 models were going to be, but that was not what was asked. And I know that I had a conversation with you, superintendent, and I had said, because early on, there were lots of other school committee members across the state having conversations about being a part of these plans. And I did ask, I said, you know, do we have a school committee rep on that? And you had said, well, it's not really policy. And so at the end of the day, we have constituents that we have to respond to. And this is like no other circumstance or situation. Like, people are very concerned. And we spent a great deal of time tonight talking about students, which I think is extremely important and really critical. But we also have another body, which is our teachers, that we're also hearing from, that we've also gotten a slew of emails from. And this is something that we need to be able to invest a good deal of time in. And so I know that you and your team have done that, but the school committee hasn't had an opportunity to do that. And I know that I have spoken to Vice Chair Collins, and I have expressed my concerns. And I know that we did or that he went ahead with the survey. But I too am also one of those parents that I missed the call when it came last night. And so I don't know that we've gotten a fair representation of our district in that data of, you know, we got 30% of parents who said they were going to do this and 30% of parents who said they were going to do that. We missed the calls. And so we're two parents that have missed the call. I can't imagine how many other parents missed those calls. So how accurate are those numbers? And, you know, I'll stop there just in case Ms. Perez and
Yes.
anybody else wants to say something, but I do have questions. I have questions about attendance and tardiness, about transportation, what accountability is going to look like. You know, how is DESE or the commissioner going to move forward on evaluating our district? Is there going to be any particular training to say, because we stopped so abruptly, to say, okay, parents, this is what's going to happen come September. We're going to roll out, you know, several days worth of training so you know how to even turn on your kid's computer, like Paul talked about. I want to know, are our kids going to have recess? Are they going to have playtime, right? I have kids that are in elementary school who they can't just sit for 8 hours. What is that going to look like? And are we going to have a number, a particular benchmark as to if there's a cluster outbreak, then yes, we're shutting down and we're moving to full online remote. What are those things going to look like? And so there are a lot of unanswered questions that I have.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Perez?
Yes, that was one of my questions because I documented that 72% by the parents was approved for the hybrid, but we didn't have the statistics. How many parents were contacted out of those 72? That was one of my concerns that I had. I know at this point that I heard the plan. I have many constituents that are grandparents. Right now, I'm dealing with a family that is COVID affected, the family. And we don't even have a plan in place. I didn't hear a plan. I think it's because we didn't I was confused. I thought the working plan, when it came to reopen the school, all this was gonna be discussed from the point of the, as being a school committee, the whole school committee. Those are the concerns that I'm bringing at the table. One of the other issues that I didn't hear with the wearing of the mask, being students, being youth, being children, how are we gonna address appropriately the issue when one student says, I don't want, or two students or 5 students in the classroom decide not to wear the mask? What are the guidelines that we're going to utilize? And my concern is because we are seeing the surge again of the coronavirus. I mean, we're trying to put a plan in place. DESE dictated to us when we submitted the plan, but they submitted it late. I think I find it very unfair. I hear from teachers right now that they don't want to even return back to work. I mean, we needed to address all those issues and not only protect the students, but protect the family, protect the teachers. I didn't hear none of those concerns that has been raised being part of the plan. I didn't hear in the plan that if a teacher feels that she's like my age and she is one of the affected if she returned, what plans are we putting in place to protect these teachers? I mean, and I was thinking that the working plan, and probably I was confused or not, was the area that we were gonna discuss per hearing from our community. And right now, we're presenting a plan that we didn't have no input into it. It probably, when you were doing your plan, if we would have had this conversation in a special meeting, probably this could have been part of the plan of the things that I have raised this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Any other school committee members?
Yeah, as far as Ms. Perez, somewhere in excess of 3,900 parents answered that survey. Now, one of them called me afterwards and she asked me, so I don't know how many students that represents, but in excess of 3,900 people. So it's not half, it is what it is.
Now,
And that was only which type of hybrid plan. That didn't mean that 32% favored hybrid. It meant
No.
if we went hybrid, which type of hybrid plan do you think you prefer based on the days? That's all that was.
Regardless of that, do they understand? Do they understand what a hybrid model is? No, they don't.
Next survey, we're going to hire teachers to come back at every school and again attempt to call every parent, explain the different options, and then ask the parents what they want, whether if they want to stay remote or do they want to try the hybrid model.
I think of our time right now, a number of the school committee people gave very specific questions. Let's try to get as many of those answered right now as we can. Maybe if we go around one at a time, we do one question at a time. Maybe there's already answers, maybe they've thought about it, maybe they haven't. But let's get some of those out on the table right now. We're all here, the meeting to discuss these things, so let's do it now.
That's the digest, but this gives a good jumping off point. You have a basis, a foundation of jumping off point on it, and now we can clarify some of the questions. And I think Ms. Naylor mentioned about, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I know some of the parents I spoke to today, we didn't realize that, Mayor, on that. So the more information we get out there, at times things can get emotional too. We get that. It's kids. This is a good, at least there's a base jumping off plan, that there's a foundation set, that a lot of things have been addressed, maybe some things have not, maybe there are specific questions. So I'm going to shut up and open it up to school committee members on who had original questions that maybe the superintendent or the staff can answer for you and for the viewing public. So
before you do that, I just say one thing, Mayor, that the slides that you all saw this evening will be put on our website tomorrow so that all parents can see at least this level of detail right away. But I think the best use of our time, again, just go ahead and let people ask.
Well, I expressed mine. Mine was based on policies. There's some students that they're gonna obey, but there's some students, how are we gonna have, what policies do we have in place? And if we are having all the students in a classroom, and 7 of them or 10 of them does not decide for the protections of the teachers and other students, are deciding not to wear the mask because there was not room in the report when it comes to the presentation of policies and procedure in terms of protecting not only that child, but the other students that are in terms of policy that are adhering to the policy, and the teacher in that classroom as well. So I didn't hear no room for that part of because I know for a fact that you tell a youth or you tell a young child to wear a mask, my children were to say, it's right now with the youth and they are getting affected just because of that reason. So I didn't hear in that aspect of the health point of view what protection was being served in that preliminary report.
I think it's a great question. Again, we followed the DESE guidelines of what should be in the preliminary report relative to giving out detail. We actually added more detail to this, but this is not the final report that the school committee is going to get. This is just a preliminary report. I think a great question is on the mask wearing. Thank you for asking that. What do we do when kids don't wear a mask? Well, the first thing we do is make sure we do the instruction around why it's important to wear a mask and go over it. If a student's not cooperating and not wearing a mask consistently, then we contact the family. If we feel it's gone that far where certain students are not going to wear a mask, we would probably suggest to school committee that we should take a look at our discipline policy. And maybe those students we could suggest remote learning because they're endangering the safety of others. So that's how I think that's going to get handled across the state. We haven't had a full clarification from the state on that yet, but that was the discussion in the last superintendent's meeting. So that's what I proposed to school committee as to how to handle it. First, again, get our counseling staff, work with the family, work with the student, try to guide them in the right direction. But if it's clear they can't wear a mask and then they're endangering the safety of others, I think that remote option is clearly available, and I think that's what we should pursue at that juncture. And that's what most folks are talking about across the state.
Can I ask a follow-up to that answer? I heard two different things. I did hear Mrs. Perez say policy and procedure. You just described a procedure that you will follow. There are probably going to be a list of policies we will need to vote on. Should one of them, I'm assuming, would be a policy that everyone must wear a mask while they're in school.
Correct.
So as going forward, we probably are going to need to list out a number of policies for us to vote on, to pass, and go along with whatever the final plan is.
I've asked our attorney to take a look at that too, the way we'd handle the mask piece in relation to our discipline policy. Not that we'd look at that as necessarily discipline, because that wouldn't be a suspension.
Correct.
Pursue remote learning. And then if we have to change the discipline code, that would be a policy and that would go in front of the school committee.
Can I just, to Ms. Perez and to Attorney Phelps, the governor has issued an edict, Helen Carlton Harris and I have issued an edict under a public health emergency, which a public health takes precedent over everything. So it would have to be a subset of that. We are indicating about mask wearing has to be done, especially out in public air. We've been trying to enforce that through educational type aspects and not fining, but there is I believe it is still on the books from the governor and from my declaration of emergency through the health department, Commissioner Helen Carlton here, which takes precedent over everything. Maybe you can clarify that, Attorney Phelps?
So that's correct, that with the state and city public health order, it's an actual order, mask wearing is required if you can't be 6 feet away, and the recommendation is even 6 feet wear a mask. So, looking at policies for the school committee with regards to masks, certainly that's on my list. Should the school committee want to amend the uniform policy or trying to figure out where exactly it fits in. But given the fact that there's a public health order, you really don't have to amend any policy. But the other thing with regards to masks is we're even looking at what can the school department, school committee do with regards to any messages that might be placed upon a mask by one of the students. And how does the school department monitor vulgar language or gang colors or anything else on those masks? So, this is all a work in progress, but we're certainly on it and considering all of the issues that would come to pass 6 weeks from now with the schools opening in some fashion.
May I add, sir, that we did receive some information from the MASC today, the Mass Association of School Committees, which really identified a lot of the policies that we should be focusing on for any changes. So I think that would be a really good place for us to start to identify some places. But I agree with Attorney Phelps, like even to the extent of making sure that people know what appropriate face covering is and don't try to take advantage of. People will do it. They will go as far as they can if we don't set any parameters and guidelines.
Right, so maybe we can base off that, but we can also base off the uniform policy that we already have.
Correct.
Yeah, but on the Mass Association School Committees, that's very important too.
Yes.
Precedent.
Yes.
We're in regular communication as a member organization with the Mass Association of School Committees and meeting at least twice a week regarding all of these issues.
Just as a suggestion, Attorney Phelps, any policies, rather than amend a lot of existing policies and then having to go back and re-amend them with this, that we create COVID-19 policies.
Correct.
And we won't have to go redo or undo.
Right. Correct.
That is the preference.
Yes.
Why don't you just go right around?
Yeah, well, school committee members, please, any and all.
So Superintendent, I have a question. With purchasing of the PPE, where did that money come from? How did the budget come into play in this?
I got it. The city picking up the tab for that. We didn't want to, the city side, I'm picking that up on city side, and I'm picking it up on grants and other COVID-19. We didn't want to, I told the order to make sure we stockpile everything and all PPEs that we need. That was done months and months ago for my city side.
So nothing came out of the school budget? Nothing? Sorry?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right.
Cleaning supplies or something that Matt Roach had to, that we would buy anyway.
Pat's on.
So far, everything has been paid for by the mayor. He has handled everything so far. We also received a $5 million grant from DESE specifically for COVID-related items that we may be using over the next few weeks and continuing to get ready for school. But we have an additional $5 million of a COVID grant that we received from the state.
Ms. Gresham, I know with Congressman Neal, Chairman Neal, and our discussions on this fourth round of COVID-related or stimulus, that there's a heavy emphasis on, obviously we want something state and local, but there is a heavy emphasis being negotiated now on direct school money. So that could be coming down the pipeline, and we appreciate the Congressman's efforts. We spoke the other day on that. But I didn't want to hold, in my cabinet head meetings every morning, very early in the morning that we didn't want to say, we don't have the money for this, we don't have the money for that. As I've done with other natural man-made disasters, track everything, which is being done on Pat Roach's side, school, and TJ on my side. I'll go after every dime of reimbursement or grant money that I get my hands on, because I didn't want to, whether it's for the residents, business community, or our students or families. So do it, get the PPEs, because eventually we are going back to school, whatever way it is. We're going to go back. So we've done that.
All right. So I have another question. So the medical waiting room, is that considered the isolation room? Because you're required to have one.
So I'll let Jeannie answer that. Jeannie Clancy.
Thank you. Okay, so DESE initially put out guidance that we would have an isolation room, which, as you know, would mean you could only put one person in it. When the fall guidance came out, they changed the isolation room to a medical waiting room, which would allow us to house more than one student in it, with the understanding that we keep the students at least 6 feet apart. That's why I meet weekly with the school physician, Dr. Molly McNally. She works at 140 High Street.
Yeah, I know Dr. McNally, I know, yeah.
Yeah, and we're also partnering with Worcester, the school physician from Worcester and nurse leader. So what we're doing for the students entering, as I mentioned, they're gonna have a surgical mask placed over their face covering and then a face shield placed on them. And the plan is to educate parents. Anyone who's symptomatic needs to go home because they need to be tested as soon as possible so they can return to school if it's negative, and obviously get treatment and follow the rules of staying out if the test comes back positive, and allows us to contact trace anyone in the facility. But the guidelines changed.
So you're saying you can have more than one student in this medical waiting room with symptoms? With symptoms?
With symptoms, yes. That's the DESE guidelines that came out.
When did that, I just want to get an understanding.
Oh, I understand.
Because the last thing I saw was an isolation room. So can you walk me through if a child exhibits symptoms, what's the process? Okay.
If a child is sick in school, that's when the nurse will get called and go to the classroom.
Now this is a child with symptoms, the COVID symptoms.
Correct, but we won't know until we get to the classroom because students are staying in classrooms and we're limiting movement to decrease exposure. And they have a mask on and they're 6 feet away in the classroom. So if they're symptomatic, the only thing we can do is have that child removed from the classroom and get the child home as soon as possible. And then they'll go to the medical waiting room.
So what happened with the students in that classroom that has been exposed?
Well, they're 6 feet away and they have masks on. And if it's an elementary school and the students have been in that classroom all day, I've talked to DPH in Springfield, and even Desi said at that time, if the child tests positive, then it would be considered an exposure for everyone in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to wait for the test to come back.
So what happened to the whole class in the interim?
There, at this point in time, we're hoping that the student would get tested immediately, and we have a couple of days before we have to worry about transmission again. So there's no easy answer because we're supposed to not come to school if we have any symptoms. That's going to be key in stopping the spread.
Wow.
Education.
I'm sorry, Nurse Clancy, if you can clarify for me, who does the testing? Is it that their parents have to take them to get tested, or do we administer tests? How does that work?
At this time, school nursing isn't administering any tests. So they would call their pediatrician, and most pediatricians are administering the test.
Okay.
So a parent would have to agree to have the child tested.
Right, and that, Ms. Naylor, good question. We're continuing to evolve. Helen and I are working, I spoke to Lieutenant Governor early last week about the stand-up testing sites for asymptomatic, and we're working on that right now. That could evolve too, whether Bay States of the world, the Mercies of the world, and also the advent of quicker testing turnaround too. So we got to be ready to adapt to that too. But as Nurse Clancy indicated, at that point in time, at the age of the child, am I correct, Superintendent? You'd have to get, I believe you'd have to get permission from the parent to do that if I'm.
Yes, the parent has to agree to testing.
But I know what we did with the homeless and medical triage tenting. We had 3 separate medical triage tenting, and you had, as Nurse Clancy indicated, you had one that was absolute. What is this? Is there an issue with this person? 1, 2, pop test. 3, if there was the quarantining side that took place, and the cot beds we had were spaced 6 feet apart, and with the hygienists that we had in there, industrial hygiene, we had constant airflow change, and we had donning and doffing areas, and so. You know, we're sort of flying we're building the plane as we fly it. But these are all good questions. I'm glad we're exchanging this right now.
May I piggyback on that question about the test? Are we doing temperature checks at all?
Desi says no.
No, Desi said no.
We're saying we can't or we shouldn't?
No, Desi, we're following the Desi guidance, and they said we should because there's too many false positives.
Okay.
Jeannie, I saw a doctor who's a national expert, and he held the machine up, which was about $250. And I'm not saying that we need them for every school or anything like that, but he showed how You swab the person, you have a vial with a solution in it, and you put it in this reading. Within 15 minutes, you had an answer. And he said, these are available. Oh, he said the false positive was almost negligible. So this was a doctor.
Those other machines.
This is a whole different one. This is only used in the hospital emergency room.
Because we're looking to buy the other ones.
So, I mean, if we can, would it behoove us if we can find out what those are, to have a few? You still have to have parent permission though, right? You can't test them without parent.
You would need parent permission. And I would have to, the problem with COVID is it's so evolving, and we need data and then more data, because we've had testing and then it's like 30% inaccurate. So I think part of it is, I don't have all the answers, and I'm open to do anything, you guys, you know that. I want these kids safe and healthy, but we have to have accurate information, and we have to be clear with our parents what we're doing in school. I agree. If there's testing, but you'd have to get permission in order to test.
Ms. Hirsch, was that, when Vice Chair Collins brought it up, I know early on in this COVID, we were looking to try to purchase machines too. I forgot the name of the machine, but we didn't go after it anymore because this was early on now. The machines were coming back with 32% false positives. So I said, don't waste hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're talking about this is something new.
This was new, and the doctor
just never said that old machine. Okay.
I know, but the problem with anything new, we're not going to have the data for months.
Yeah.
So they do initial testing and it shows positive, but then as they do so much more testing is when they come up with the data.
I don't mean it was a new machine. This was the first time someone had talked about it. He said they've been using it in hospitals for a couple of years, and the reliability is above 95%. And he said he was surprised at how inexpensive a machine it was and how quickly they can get answers. Regardless of whether we can find out what the thing that is not, I think we need to urge the governor to put some money and so we can test students more quickly than having to wait and go, because you've got a whole classroom now waiting for it.
Exactly. Not only the classroom, but the teachers as well. And this is the question, this is because of COVID-19, but if my child is not vaccinated, you will not allow him in school, correct? Now, the issue is, let's say this student goes to the doctor to get tested. We all have to be transparent. Right now, the testings in the United States, it takes weeks. I mean, and I'm concerned about those are the ones that are being affected by this child being in the classroom. We need to have all these conversations, and conversation like this one, it will tell the parents for the decision of having their children go back to school or not. Because I know for a fact that we are so behind in the testing. Okay, the other policy, how do we follow that parent? Because we have parents that will jump at it, but there will parents that will take the time. I mean, and we here on a whole expecting to hear what happened with that child. So all this is what the parents right now are asking. You know, how is my child protected in this classroom, and what will you do about it so I could feel I could send my child even in the hybrid model that they're gonna be in school. So I think we need to still have these conversations. I don't know where and how, because this is the decision making from the parent perspective, the guidelines if they should send their children to school or not. I don't know. There's a lot of questions when it comes to the COVID-19, but right now we need to look at all of that. And I put an example. You don't have a vaccine, you don't get tested, you don't return, because that's the thing. I haven't heard if you're not tested, it might well happen. What's going to happen? You know what I'm saying? For the protection of others.
Yeah, I'm going to go.
So may I?
I'm going to go to Ms. Hurst just before that, maybe on this The subsequent meeting before the Thursday meeting, I believe we're gonna have it. Maybe I can also have Commissioner Carlton Harris on there too. A lot of these questions she could address too, so Superintendent would make note of that to have Commissioner Carlton Harris. Ms. Hurst, I'm sorry, thanks for your patience.
Nope, that's okay, Mr. Mayor. So, you know, to Maria's point, I guess I pose this question to Attorney Phelps. You know, are we going to enact any policies between now and the start of school that parents are going to be made aware of so that they know, you know, X, Y, and Z must happen. Otherwise, you know, they can't come back to school, or they can only come back to school. And earlier in the presentation, Assistant Superintendent Lydia Martinez talked about being able to transition to one of the other models if necessary. And I guess my question is that if in fact we do implement a hybrid model and we have to at some point transition to a fully remote model, what is the impetus for that decision? What is the benchmark? Is it going to be that we have a cluster outbreak and there are 5 people who have tested, 10 people, 20 people? How is that decision going to be made? And is it going to be embedded in policy, or is it going to be that we're going to see how things happen because we're hesitant? We know that kids rely on us for food. What is going to happen? How planned out is that going to be? Because I think that that's a real important thing to know. I think that I agreed when Ms. Naylor said that, you know, we had to stop abruptly the last time in March, but I also know that we were really hesitant to close because we knew how much our students relied on us for things such as food. So now I'm wondering what's going to happen if in fact we have to move to a full remote model because we have an outbreak. How is that going to get determined? How is that going to get decided?
I think that the first part of the question was directed to me with regards to policies, and I'd be happy to answer that. That's certainly up to the school committee to adopt COVID policies. I'm putting together a list for your consideration as to whether or not there would be a policy. There's always the difficulty with regards to what are operational decisions versus policy decisions. And I think, you know, it's such a moving target. DESE has coming out with things twice a week. It was called an isolation room for about 3 weeks, and then it became a medical waiting room with increased ability to have more students in the room. So, you know, although it'd be great to have some definition and we'd all like some certainty in our lives, I just think at this point in time, we are all trying to figure it out. It's not unique to Springfield. It is unique to every district across this Commonwealth, as well as the country. So there is a list that I'm preparing for the school committee's consideration. Obviously, you develop policy and vote on policy, and that would be certainly within your jurisdiction. But I think that certainly the MASC has indicated that the operational decisions are still within the purview of the superintendent. And so the ability to make decisions is delegated to him, especially quick decisions. With regards to the closure, that was an easy decision because the governor made that decision back in March.
Melinda, if I can just interject?
Sure.
DESE came out on July 17th with regarding responding to COVID-19 scenarios. And one of the scenarios at the end addressed the issue that that was just asked about what's the protocol for potential school closures. So they have outlined on a high level what that potential school closures are. And those are steps that involve consulting with the local Board of Health, as well as looking at district leaders must consult with, also consult with DESE itself, because no school can close without consulting and getting the guidance from DESE. So there's some steps that DESE has told us on a very high level of what to do. We are expecting that we're going to get more information, the details of that, but that's what we're looking, that's what we know so far is what DESE is instructing us. There are some protocols that have come out on that.
Hey, Kennedy, I'm just going to say our clearinghouse made them. Commissioner Helen Colton Harris and Director Pat Sullivan. When anything cropped up in our meetings that the division here or department here, geez, we have this, or what's the protocol we should follow on the individual and/or individuals and/or the site they were at, they gave fantastic leadership, and we did. If we had the deep cleaning, quarantining of an individual, or testing everything, so that would be. I'm all about home first, and that would be the first thing saying, Helen, we had a report here, Patrick, we've had a report here on this certain school or this area of a school here, recommendation. And that's how we've handled it. We've been able to keep our numbers down if something was to arise. So obviously you said that, the 30,000 foot view is you'll get from the DESE and the governor, but they are trickling it all down to the local.
Oh, I'm sorry, I may have misspoke. The first step is that you would contact the local board of health, and then.
Yes. I was going to say that before you said that.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly the same protocol that the mayor has just described is what DESE is recommending too, is that you work through your local board of health as to what to do, and then you go higher up if you're actually going to close down the school.
No, that's where we come in as a body, as a school body, because those are the guidelines that we are looking, that we could inform our constituents that are asking the questions. I'm going to tell you something right now, based on this meeting tonight. I personally have so many concerns that I don't think, even if we presented this hybrid model, I don't feel that we are prepared to open the school because of X, Y, and Z that are missing. I don't know how the other colleagues are feeling, but it's because we don't have those answers. We don't have those reports that we're reading, because I've read the initial fall school reopening guidance by the commissioner, and they are very open-ended. I mean, it relies on us. Everything that I have read, it relies on us, back again to us. There's a model, there's 3 models that were put together, but they say you go and figure it out. So I'm in the stage of figuring all this out, and probably there's some information that we're not receiving as a school body that we could feel that we shouldn't have the concerns that we are presenting. And if that's the point, we need to address that. So us as elected official in a school body that we are, we able to correctly inform the community, and that's the bottom line. So they could make their realistic decision of what model they want to utilize. And I'm leaving it at that, but I think I feel that we're not there yet, and probably we have a working, Denise requested a working plan. I don't know what's going to happen in that working plan, but at this stage, I hear that this is watching all this, but at the interim, we're dealing with people's life, is what I'm trying to say. And it's going to come back to us as the school committee body. You know?
And Ms. Perez, I want to piggyback on what you're saying, because DESE also suggested 3 feet distance, and we have quickly said that is not acceptable, right? We want to go based on CDC 6 feet at least. So whatever they're suggesting, whether it be for this emergency waiting room or whatever they're saying, I'm not confident in their suggestions, and I feel like whatever restrictions they put on us, that we need to go beyond those restrictions, because I just don't feel safe about it. I mean, when I go take my kids to urgent care, they don't let you got to call and you can't even go in the waiting room. You got to go straight into the doctor's office. There's no stopping anywhere. There's no sitting with anybody in a room with you. You got to go straight to the doctor and you come straight out, and everything is by appointment. So if we're doing that in a professional setting with people who every day have to deal with people who are sick, I'm not convinced that us having a space for a bunch of kids that may or may not be sick, where we only will know 2 or 3 later if their parents decide to take them to get tested, that they're actually sick, and now they may have infected who knows how many people in the process. But the other piece of it is just, it's scary because most parents still send their kids to school sick before COVID. They still send their kids with fevers. They still send their kids throwing up in the middle of the classroom. And it's ridiculous that the stomach flus and all these things that our kids come home. I always joke and say the elementary schools are a big petri dish. Like, they bring everything there, and the next thing you know, the teachers are sick all the time. So if that's just with pre-COVID, imagine with COVID what contamination could happen if we are not extra cautious. So even though they may not say mandated temperature checks, we still should do them. Even though they're saying it's not mandatory to have an isolation room, those things need to happen if we're going to make people feel safe and know that we're not just going to listen to DESE and say this is the bare minimum of what you should do and then you're okay, because we are responsible if something happens to somebody. And if somebody's child dies or a teacher dies, I'm not going to be able to sleep at night.
Mr. Mayor, if I could shed some light on that question. It's Pat Sullivan talking. So early on, we came up with protocols for police, fire, and all of our city buildings that if someone did test or had left work because they had symptoms, we went immediately with either Springfield abatement or our internal teams and immediately in those workspaces. We had the electronic guns that I think there's about 12 now in the school district. We're acquiring more that kill the virus within 30 seconds. We also have a product that we will have available across the district that kills the COVID virus within 2 minutes. So I would suggest that.
I'm sorry, Pat. We can't hear you, Pat.
Pat, Director Sullivan, you're breaking up, Pat.
I'm sorry, I'll keep it very short. I just want to assure the school committee that in the past, and we'll carry this over to the schools. Can you hear me now a little better?
Yeah.
Yeah. That we will, we have products available that we have used both at our police stations, fire stations, all of our buildings across the city, that if we get a report that someone has left work with symptoms, we immediately go into that workspace and clean it. And that will be the case with any of the, say if someone left a classroom with symptoms, we would immediately either bring an outside team like Springfield Abatement in, or our internal teams that have been trained to clean that classroom. And then the medical waiting rooms would be cleaned periodically throughout the day, and that product cleans the virus within 2 minutes. And schools that have the electromagnetic guns will clean that virus within 30 to 40 seconds. So we are putting all those products available, and we've had great success. We kept our numbers very low, as the mayor can attest to, both at our police department and our fire departments. And I think the police mayor, the all-time high might have been 15. I don't think we went over 15. And then the same, I think fire never went over 6 individuals, firemen out at a time. So I think to the mayor's point, our methods have been working as far as responding. And that's the key with this virus. When you get the information, you've got to respond to immediately, and that's our plan going forward with this plan. And then just to give you some other peace of mind, the superintendent, the minute he got that report from DESE, he got it out to all of us. I know our team was working right through the weekend, so we would be ready for this meeting tonight. So we're all working to get you this information, but we really couldn't have gone any faster. I know you would wanted it sooner tonight, but from my stand, I was, 9 o'clock last night, I sent Danny my spreadsheet because it took that long to get you the right information so you could be making informed decisions. So I'll be quiet now.
Oh, thank you.
So Mayor, so 2 things. One is that I do think that that's really helpful to hear, Pat. But I guess my concern is that those are all adults, and we're talking about little kids in some instances. And so, you know, our officers, especially because they're first responders, you know, they know and understand how serious this is. I don't know that that's necessarily the case for our pre-K through 12. And so I guess I'm just wondering, what option are we submitting tomorrow? What is being submitted tomorrow? Is it the Group A, Group B, Monday, Tuesday? Is that the option that we're considering? Are we considering the 4-day option? What are we submitting?
Well, I'd love to hear from the school committee tonight before we submit anything for tomorrow. And that was the intent of the meeting. But again, this is preliminary. We don't have to stick by what we submit tomorrow. And again, I apologize. These timelines were set by DESE, and all the guidance from DESE has been late all summer. And the commissioner held everything close, trying to negotiate with the unions and do this statewide, but it failed. So he's thrown it back on our laps in the 11th hour. So very, very difficult. So, you know, I certainly think if we get a feel from school committee tonight for our preliminary recommendation, we'll submit that as our preliminary recommendation.
So Superintendent, I guess my question is, I feel like we only heard about the one model, the Group A, Group B, 2 days on, 2 days on, 3 days off. I don't feel like we heard about any other particular types of models. And I know that you've been in contact with other superintendents in other districts, and I know that that's really helpful. But I also am mindful about what are the demographics of those other districts, right? Because we know that we have a high percentage of people of color, and we know that this virus has disproportionately affected our Black and Latino communities. We also know that we have a high level of poverty. We know that we have people who can't afford to quarantine for 14 days, who might not be so forthcoming about saying, I think my child might have a symptom, because childcare is, or they rely on school as their sole resource of childcare. And so I guess I have to believe that you and your team took those things into consideration, because I know that you guys are very conscientious about that. But I'm just wondering, how did that play into this one particular model that's been presented, and are there any other that are being looked at?
So great question. So, you know, as we talked about back in June, there's 3 possible models. There's full reentry, where we bring everyone back, and the commissioner said they can be 3 feet away. That's an option. That's still an option. I wouldn't recommend it, but that's an option. There's a hybrid model. Most of the folks across the state are going to hybrid. That doesn't mean
nope.
With a hybrid model, most of the school systems I work with, and we've been, our team has been working every week with a team from Worcester, which is the system that's most like us in the state, relative to size, demographics, and so on. We're working very, very closely with them. So to take a look at things, to try to figure out regionally, most folks are going with that hybrid, so it would work with the schedules. But I'm not suggesting to you that that's the only model for your choice. Then the other choice, as we said back in June and again, is remote only. We could open remote only if folks aren't comfortable that we're ready at this juncture, which is definitely something that I think the school committee should consider. And if that's the direction from the school committee, we'll be ready to go with a remote only model for you. So it's completely your decision relative to the model, and we will execute any of those 3 models. We've tried to prepare for all 3 this summer, and then at a late date, we got a late plan with timelines that I agree with you are ridiculous and frustrating, and I feel bad for school committee. And believe me, the superintendents across the state are also frustrated with this because we got handed a tough thing at a late date to deal with. So we're doing the best we can. But we have all 3 options. It's a school committee vote on the option. and we'll present the option to DESE that school committee would like to open with. So whatever you decide as a team is what we'll present.
Can I just say one, Denise, good question you brought up. We discussed this at cabinet committee. I was quite frankly surprised, with all due respect to my like Mr. the temperature taking, which has been very strong for us preserving and protecting our workforce. And we were discussing at early morning cabinet meetings, where would that take place? Does that take place before we work to deal with the bus company, before they get on the bus so the parent knows? If it takes place at the school, this is not only for students, but for teachers too. We have a transportation mechanism to get them back home and make sure a parent and their guardians got. So I was surprised when that was thrown out the window. I think here, and again, it is up to us, the school committee, but the superintendent put together all the plans. I think going all 100% in was really out of the question. How we do that? Is there a possibility of the hybrid? Got to look into it. If we start remote, our goal is, we're going to defeat this COVID-19, the
transition of getting back to normalcy on that. So, I think Mrs. Hurst was asking, were there other hybrid models that you looked at and may have decided weren't as good as that? Is that what you were asking, Mrs. Hurst?
Yes, I guess I was wondering, is that the only hybrid model?
Not the only hybrid model. The commissioner liked a week on, week off model. Most of the superintendents and their teams did not agree because 10 days between when you see the kids, and it would be too long. So most of the systems settled. If you're going to go hybrid, the model we suggested, and that's why we asked the parents to see if it was hybrid and if those were the two most significant possible models, where would you weigh in on the model? But again, hybrid isn't the only option. If another option would be, if you're not confident that we're ready, is to stagger the start and start with remote, and then down the road when we have more time to work things out, we could try to go to a hybrid model. So I've heard some people talking about staggering the start for that. So that's another option for school committee as well. I'm hearing grave consternation is a late date. We're 6 weeks away, and the late guidance from DESE on everything, which again has been very difficult to deal with. So as superintendents, we've been very, very frustrated with it, and I get school committee's frustration because it is very frustrating.
Murph, were you trying to jump in, Peter? I know your box was going on. I just want to double check. Okay, well, I'm sorry. Back to the school.
So Denise, were you finished, Denise? Oh, okay. So, so superintendent, you're recommending the hybrid model, correct?
I'm recommending that you consider it, but if from what I'm hearing, grave concern about it, we would absolutely turn this in as remote to open up with, if that is the will of the school committee.
Because with the hybrid, it is more susceptible that children will be exposed to COVID because of the mixing, regardless of how minimal the mixing is. Because they mentioned that, I think Mary Ann mentioned minimal exposure in her presentation.
So I guess
because of the different students at different times.
So with full reentry, you'd have the maximum exposure. With hybrid, you'd be probably talking about 35% of the population and spreading them out more. Still having some possible exposure to COVID.
Exactly.
So the safest plan relative to the spread is remote only. The commissioner is strongly recommending that we consider something that gets the kids back to school. We don't have to do that. So if the committee feels, given all the guidance and the late arrival of the guidance, that we should open remote, we can certainly do that. Would that be the safest option if that was your question, Barbara? Yes, it would.
May I ask a question? Or Ms. Gresham, are you finished?
Yes.
So my question, kind of piggybacking again on Ms. Gresham and Ms. Hurst, is so I'll be completely honest. Like, I want my kids to go back to school as soon as possible, right? I want the kids to be able to interact with somebody and their peers in some capacity, even though it won't be as much as they desire, right? But the reality is it is still so unsafe and so uncertain. We just don't have enough data. We just don't, all of these different things. But I'll be completely honest. My biggest reason for why I was advocating for hybrid in the beginning was because I thought about the social, emotional issues that are happening with kids. I thought about the fact that a lot of our kids rely on counselors, rely on just being in school and the services that they receive from being in school in order to stay in a frame, a healthy frame of mind, right? And be able to get the education that they need. So my biggest concern is this: health-wise, yes, I think that we should start remotely, but I'm also concerned about those kids who are not engaged and will not be engaged if we are 100% remote, right? I'm also thinking about the kids who are special needs, who need to have that interaction, and their parents are not able to educate them in the same way. That's why you have special education teachers, to make sure that those kids get the education that they need. So I looked at, I was reviewing a Harvard Business Review article or something. I think MASC shared it with us today. And they were talking about the phasing approaches of phasing in the kids depending on need and all of these different things. So it's not just we're starting off hybrid and then everybody's back. I mean, starting off online and then everybody's hybrid, but more of a phase-in approach of those kids that really need it the most are now being phased in on a hybrid level until we get to a point where we're able to have more kids into the building. I think prioritizing those kids who have the high needs, prioritizing those kids who are EL, and those kids who have IEPs, and then kind of moving along there. But that was a really good research that they share with us, and I think we should highly, dig into that. We should dig into that research a little bit more, just to be able to make sure that we're being safe, but also doing our job of educating our students. And I really want to say that, if we're gonna focus on an online, which I'll be honest, at this point, after having this lengthy conversation, I feel more strongly to advocate for 100% online at this point. I want to make sure that the curriculum or the interaction is such that the kids are going to still receive a fair and equitable education. And what that looks like, I really want to better understand, because it can't look like what it looked like the last couple months of school.
We couldn't agree with you more on that, Latonia, that the emergency closure called a quick end to school. I actually closed before the commissioner and governor did because of the safety issues. But, we didn't have even our laptops at home for students at the time. So we had to quickly pivot. We got a lot of the laptops distributed. And then the commissioner came up with an agreement with the unions relative to how to implement, thinking for a short-term emergency situation to get something remote going. That cannot be a long-term plan. So staff has been working very, very hard, knowing there's a possibility we open with remote for a robust, full-day remote plan. But I don't think we'd argue telling you that would a remote-only plan be as good for students educationally as some reentry into school. That's why the commissioner has been recommending a plan that involves reentry, that model would be stronger. So would a hybrid be stronger educationally? I would say yes. Given the late date for all the guidance and everything else, if everyone thinks we should start remote, we could start remote and stagger into hybrid. We could start remote and look at returning some of our high needs populations before other populations. That's also an option. Like we talked about bringing them in for more days. We could bring them in before everyone else. So all of those are options that are available to us. But I don't think we're going to argue that remote, even if we deliver it a lot better, is it as strong as some in-person teaching? No, it's not. But what we're going to propose to you is what we have ready for you remotely. And we spent a lot of time getting ready for all three of these. We spent a lot of time on the remote because, you know, given the COVID rates, we never know where we're going to be with it. Is a very different remote than we were able to put forward last spring with the agreements of the union and the commissioner. So it would be a very different plan. It would need to be a lot more robust. It would be, you know, we'd have full grading, full attendance, certain times for everything going on, and a really robust plan if that's what folks chose. Would it be as strong educationally as something in person? I would say no, but it would be a lot better than we did in the spring, and it probably would be the safest approach to it. So those are all options available to us, and certainly looking at phasing in high needs first would certainly be an option. And then staggering who we bring in later, a staggered option is certainly something we can work on. What we were tasked with DESE is plan for every possibility, and then at the last minute we got told to go towards a plan and recommend.
Can I add? Can I add?
Yeah, I should. I've been listening mostly. I'm equating hybrid kind of like the restaurants. You know, the restaurants were completely closed. Am I ready to go inside a restaurant, looking at everything that's going on in Massachusetts, the infection rates? Absolutely not, I'm not. Would I go eat at a picnic table outside a restaurant? I'm ready to do that. And that's what I'm kind of equating the hybrid method for the school. My biggest fear about the kids is, Latonia brought up, is the social and emotional. That's one of my fears, because, and it's a huge fear, especially for the children we serve. It's a real big fear. The other thing is this ELL and kids with IEPs are not the only kids I'm worried about. A lot of kids are not going to do well in the remote. A lot of kids need interaction with teachers. They're never going to flourish, and they're going to fall even further behind. And that's what I'm wrestling with. Some kids they're visual learners. They're auditory. That presentation, even though they happen to be good students, is not going to work for them. That's my fear about if we decide to go all remote, is a large group of our kids that can't afford to, are going to fall even further behind. I'm still leaning towards, I'll tell you, I'm still leaning towards a hybrid, because I'm thinking, I taught for a long time, I'm thinking all those kids sitting in front of me, and the ones that I know without me being able to pick up on body language cues, on facial expressions, that they're missing it. And a teacher's not going to get that through a computer screen. And not be able to go and know that I've got to give that particular child a little extra help, a little more attention. We're going to lose all of that. And when we lose all of that, our children are going to fall further and further and further behind. That's what's got me leaning towards a hybrid.
Can I just say, if pardon the pun, taking the temperature check here, it seems that the committee, because the superintendent does have to present something tomorrow, is leaning. I think we all would like to try to see if we get that hybrid, or be prepared to transition to a hybrid. It seems to be leaning more towards a remote, and I think we're going to have a meeting next Thursday, and I think we're going to do that town hall Tuesday to get a temperature check there. But
Thursday's when we make that. He's got what he needs to submit for just with this, right?
Well, again, though, if the committee's leaning heavily in one direction, we were asked to say where are you at this point.
Yeah.
We thought, given everything, because most of the systems were going hybrid, we could recommend hybrid. But if the committee's leaning towards remote only,
That's why I
I
brought
would
it up.
submit
If it
remote.
got to the 10th of August and we can
That's the
take
final record.
another, we've got at least ourselves to the 6th. If we can take another week to ruminate over a lot of the things we're thinking about and make that decision next Tuesday, like we talked about.
Yep.
And besides, don't forget, one of the next items on the agenda, it was going to create an opportunity to hear more from the parents in between.
All the stakeholders.
I'd hate to say where I'm leaning without listening to that.
Right. Agreed.
Okay.
Another option could be to consider is that you start a lot of groups remote and some of these high needs groups come in hybrid or slower at the beginning, wait till the second quarter, see where we're at, and then go to hybrid so you have more time because all the guidance came out very late, and stagger it. So that's an option too. So just something to consider for the school. But again, asking for a decision.
Sir?
So after you submit tomorrow, do you have an opportunity to edit or amend or modify based on what comes out of Tuesday's public inquiry?
Explain this well enough, Denise. This is a preliminary idea, what we'd be submitting tomorrow. Nothing anyone's held to. And then the final plan DESE wants by the 10th. We suggested a meeting on the 6th because if the committee's leaning in a certain direction or wants modifications, it's going to be a much more comprehensive plan than we put it forward at that time. But right now, there's a couple options we'd have. The DESE was a preliminary idea where people are leaning. But if folks aren't ready to put that in right now, I think we would submit the plan without that in there and just submit what we've done planning for the 3 options. And that could be an option for us tonight as well.
So I would advocate that you submit what you have thus far, but like Chris just said, I think that we can't lean until we listen.
Yeah, we'll do that. I agree, the timeline, so we'd be glad to do that.
So tomorrow you're going to submit the hybrid model, correct?
Now based on direction from the school committee.
So can you submit remote and then we listen to the stagger and gradually go into remote? I mean, go into hybrid? Can you stagger it?
I think we could submit anything you folks, the consensus of the team is. But the other option we have is not follow the DESE directive because their timeline was ridiculous and say, let's not tell them where the committee's leaning right now. Say the committee needs more time, but we don't know. So I'll submit the 3 available plans and all the work we've done on them within the report that you've seen. And at this juncture, the committee hasn't made a decision on where they're leaning towards right.
So you would submit what we reviewed without no indication of where we're leaning, because we need to hear more.
So in that space that says recommended will be nothing there, right?
I would leave that empty. If it's the direction of the school committee to leave that empty for now, I will leave that empty at the direction of the school committee if that is the will of the team.
Superintendent Warwick, just a clarification that the way the DESE has set up the online submission process, we actually are not able to leave that blank. But it is clear that whatever we submit tomorrow is not in any way binding.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
So
I know
what field can't you leave blank, Paul?
We are required to submit for elementary, middle, and high school, fully remote, hybrid, fully in person, and we have to check a box for which of those 3 models we are currently thinking is the way we're going to open. So it's not even really in the staggering. They're really asking you, how do you think as of tomorrow you're going to open school? And so, but it's not, just to emphasize, right, tomorrow was the preliminary because I think the department wants a read of where districts generally are going. It's the binding plan is what gets voted next week that we have to submit by the 10th. So there's nothing about what we submit tomorrow that we're locked into.
I got what you're saying. It's a computerized form, and it's going to keep trying to reject it if it's a box.
Yeah.
You have to print it out and send it to them. Yeah, quite honestly, I'm ready to say to Desi, we're not telling you which way we're leaning because we don't know. That's where I'm at.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think, I understand the committee's frustration, so if that's what you want us to do, they've set it up so we have to submit it that way, but I'm gonna do what the school committee wants, because I think everything that's come out of DESI has been late and dropped.
So if I'm understanding, Mr. Foster said we have to put something in that block, the recommended section of it, right?
You know, in order to click submit, it will not accept it if we don't have something in the box. It sounds like, I mean, we could not submit it, obviously, but.
So with the surveys that you did with the parents, what was the percentage? What was the highest percentage of the 3 models?
Unfortunately, Barbara, it wasn't a complete survey where it said, do you want remote only? It didn't go the way we had this discussion tonight. It was, if we go with hybrid, which model would you like?
Yeah.
I think, and I thought I heard a majority of the people's boxes light up. I think the superintendent should print it out with everything but that box and mail it to them. If the computer won't take it,
but it's due tomorrow. So how you gonna, what you gonna overnight it?
Yeah, well, yeah. And they gave the school department their guidance on busing at midnight last Thursday. I think we can send them a printed copy without a box.
Yeah, I'm very frustrated with this.
Can I say something?
Yes.
That's the directive.
Ms. Milner.
If we're not bound by a decision, I think we're putting too much energy into what we're going to put in a box if we're not bound to that decision until a week or so later. So if we have to submit online like every other district, I think we should submit online, and we need to come up with, a school committee needs to come up with which direction they want to go, and if it's not binding, and then get all the facts and make a final decision. I think we're putting too much energy into it.
I respect your opinion, Darcia. My problem is nothing with DESI stays private. Someone's going to see that form from Springfield saying we're leaning towards remote. It's going to get out to the public, and the school committee are the ones who are going to have to answer to that. Why did you make a decision without hearing from us first?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell DESI I'm not.
Same thing with putting hybrid in there.
I mean, I'm agreeing with you, Bob. We're putting everything.
Yeah, so that's why we should have been involved in the very beginning. We wouldn't be doing this right now.
Well, it wouldn't change our dilemma right now.
No. Yeah, I mean, DESI gave us this form a week ago. We've been trying to fill it out.
If it's sent and stating with extenuating circumstances, here's our 3 preliminary plans. But yet, we just received this less than a week ago. We've had a formal school committee meeting. We are, as some other communities are doing, we, out of respect to the students, families, and teachers or staff of the Springfield Public School System, are having a town hall meeting. We want to get input there. And at that point in time, we have another follow-up meeting, emergency meeting on next Thursday, and we will issue a recommendation at that point in time, doing it that way. And I think it'd be good, Latonia, which you had brought it up and we corresponded. And I know sometimes we could get emotional, you know, who's going to come on there or who has an axe to grind or this, that. But I think on the calls I returned today, there was a lot of misinformation out there when what I was able to clarify. Oh, I didn't realize that there. I didn't realize on that. And that could be very helpful to us. But I mean, if there's a way, I'd have to agree with I know stats, that's what we call you stats, and all the attorneys, the legals keep us in line. But at this point in time, technically we're presenting 3 versions. And an asterisk that in whatever way we get it to, that right now, school committee got their first crack at this in less than a week to take a look at it. We have not heard, you know, we've heard indirectly or directly from on calls or emails, but we wanted to do a town hall to hear from not only to hear from the parents and students, teachers, staff, but also to get out, correct some miscommunications that have been out there. Then at that point in time, we will concretely make a recommendation on a vote, on a public vote, next Thursday moving forward. I think our goal, though, is if we continue to move in the right direction, somehow, whether it's staggered, get our kids back into school when it's appropriate. But on temperature check I'm getting here is that, which I think a few of us were trying to see if we could do hybrid. I think, honestly, people are nodding their head yes on that, but some questions that come up now on procedure, that's not, I can't say Superintendent Dessy came in very late, so maybe if that's the way we go, we express it or something.
That's a computer geek question. That box, that box, is it numeric answer or is it an alpha answer?
Is it stop? Is it stop?
It's just a checkbox.
Oh, it's a checkbox. Okay.
So
check all three.
If you don't check, you won't submit, and you can't go any further.
Yeah, it's like any of those online forms you ever fill out with the little asterisk that says this is a required field. You don't fill out the required field, and you go to hit submit. It says please fill out the required field.
So, if something through the superintendent on behalf of the school committee is sent to, with all due respect to Dessy Commissioner Riley stating here, we've had a very thoughtful conversation. It's very emotional.
A discussion. This is a discussion.
We still have a couple more steps we need to do on it, and here we're going to get you here's our best case scenario, worst case scenario, middle of the road scenario, and we'll have a decision for you after the town hall. We'll have a formal vote next Thursday on that.
Simple question. What's going to happen if you miss the deadline?
Are they going to penalize?
They're going to call you, say, why didn't you submit it? And you tell them the committee isn't leaning anyway right now.
Can I just ask a question with regards to the form? It doesn't indicate when, for example, if it was hybrid, that was the chosen drop down, it doesn't indicate when the hybrid would begin. So if in fact it's the school committee's desire that some amount of time in classroom is desirable for our kids, and given the population and given the fact that every education says in classroom learning is great, the question of when is still something that can be decided down the road. Is that correct?
That is correct, and Worcester is looking at doing it that way. So it's hybrid, but they're going to stagger the opening for a lot of their kids to a much later date and see how it's going.
Yeah.
So, but I don't want to.
My reaction to you, Attorney Phelps, is the same as it was to Darcia. Nothing stays private in Dessy. It will get out that Springfield School Committee to have the superintendent fill a form and check this is what we're leaning towards. That's going to get out. I don't usually think politically, but that's going to get out. We're the ones who are going to have to answer for that.
And so is every other school committee across this Commonwealth as of tomorrow. The only other thing I wanted to say legally, my heart stopped with the thought of treating kids, disabled children, students differently than non-disabled students. And that raises all sorts of legal implications of requiring or offering, those disabled students to return where other people could work remotely. So I'm just raising that as an issue for the committee. There's a lot of things that would have to be looked at in order to make certain that we are not treating disabled children differently than non-disabled children.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just to save my heart, that I just had to communicate that, because those are the types of things that keep you up at night in terms of making sure we treat all kids fairly.
And I think that's why I suggested it, because I've seen the data from Harvard Business Review and their data of the research that they've done across districts, and they suggested to do a phase-in model with prioritizing the kids that have the highest need, because they really need more so than others to have that one-on-one based on legal requirements of whether it be their IEP or what have you. So I don't feel that it's inequitable or that it's discriminatory. I think that it's on the basis that legally we are required to provide certain care and support for them and that they cannot get at home.
Correct, but we recently just litigated segregation of disabled students versus non-disabled. So there's just a lot. My only point is there's a lot of legal issues in that model.
Mr. Mayor? Yes. So at the town hall, we are gonna present the 3 models and discuss the 3 models and get feedback from the community of what is the best model to approach. What's the agenda for the town hall is my question.
Can I ask a question to that in addition to Maria's? It's Thursday evening. What are we going to do to make sure that families know that this is going to happen on Tuesday so that they can be a part of this? Like, how are we going to do a press release, like outside of social media and a connected, what else can we do so that we can really ensure?
Before we jump to the town hall, so we have some temporary closure right now on the preliminary reopening plan. The superintendent's going to follow our lead. So are we submitting with no checks, boxes in, and sending an email to them, Desi, indicating that this is the will of the school committee now because we're still doing our due diligence on discussion? Are we submitting with a check mark of hybrid, knowing that we don't have to adhere to that, or remote? The superintendent wants to know the will of the committee right now.
I would suggest leaving the box empty and sending an attachment or an email or something saying that we cannot make a decision right now.
Is that,
you'd have to take the form, make it a PDF, and attach it to an email.
Yeah.
And send it along.
Is that the will of the, Danny, is that something you can do that?
Oh, we're going to do whatever the will of the committee is. I mean, I'll figure out how to do it. I mean, I have Paul, who's a technical genius. I think maybe we could do something with an email to Jeff Riley saying, this is the problem we have. And you know what? They created the problem with the timelines they set forth. So I'm fine with sending
that,
then we can, if that's the will of the committee.
Then we can move on town hall. That's about what we're going to do and the date and time and getting out. So is that the will on A, discuss preliminary school reopening? That's the will of the committee right now?
Correct. I think. Yeah.
We're not voting.
No, this is not a vote. I'm just
not a vote.
No. What I was saying was the agenda. So I think that I heard that a small group of people was contacted and we didn't have no feedback as a body where they stand with those 3 models. That's what we're presenting on the town hall when it comes to the model, explaining the model and hearing from the community.
Just before we jump to that, again, just last time, the will of the committee is to submit this with a extenuating circumstances, saying here's our plan, 3 possibilities here, really 2 or 1, and because of the short time frame and the due diligence that the school committee, their response that we want to do, we have to, and we want to do it. This is what we submit, so we're good with that then.
Yes.
Okay, so that takes care of that now.
Okay, make sure we got it right. So you're leaving the recommended blocks empty. Empty.
Please slip.
Okay, and the superintendent will send an addendum or a message. Or can he let us know what he sends, what he writes to them?
To Jeff Riley, the commissioner, that the committee, at the committee's discretion, that we are unable to make a decision on even an initial feeling on a model at this time. They want to take more time to look it over.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good to me.
Pretty good? Okay.
Good.
I see your thumbs up. Good.
Good.
see a thumbs up. Sometimes I don't get thumbs up, Latonia, you know.
But sometimes you get.
I get you. Yeah, I get a digit up at times. So, okay, so now let's, B is to discuss town hall meeting regarding school opening, and I think we were just on logistics. We were targeting for for Tuesday.
Latonia called me. It was a great idea, and I was not going to make a decision for the committee. I believed we would all want to do it, so I called Focus to see what times they had available, because obviously we'd like to get this input before we meet on Thursday. And the time that they have available is Tuesday night at 6 o'clock to do a town hall where superintendent would put out this, and public would be able to give us input through the process, using the Zoom process. And thank you, Latonia, for telling me about the hands up. That we can utilize that as just a logistics thing. And Zell is, I'm sure, watching this meeting. She has prepared a press release. If we decide we're going to have the town hall, that press release will go out this evening, so that people will know that it's taking place.
And the other question too would be on this. I think it's important. We want as many people to participate, no matter how they feel, and we want it to be structured and constructive. I know get emotions once constructive is fine. That the presentation be made first. I think everybody who's on the besides school committee members, the staff, the administration that's here, and I think it'd be great. We should also Commissioner Helen Carlton Harris that might be able to address on the public health. Yeah, for. On that. So, and that's how we would do it. So Maria, school committee woman Perez, you would ask about the agenda. The agenda would be an opening up framing, a presentation, a short, here's what we have right now. And then we would, a structured way, Latonia, I guess you would say there's a hands up type thing, or raise your hand, a structured thing about questions. And maybe at that point in time, whether questions first and then we address them after, or if it's cut and dried, they're addressed at that point in time. And then I don't know if it's a show of hands, how people feel.
They'll let people in, and we should be listening to people, is what we should be.
Right. See, but the thing is, I'm confused. We're going to be listening to people, and for point of structure, I think that what I'm hearing is that we have not decided what model. I think the community should be charged at that town hall. You know what? With the discussion, so we could have a feel of it besides the robocall that was done. I think at that point. So,
this is a quick description of the 3 possible options as an opener, and then the folks who are listening in can give us a feel for what they'd like. Would that be helpful? Or how do you want to frame it?
May I make a suggestion? Something that I've seen happen is that people will have like a link to a Google form or survey in a chat box, or have it available for folks during the live event, and people can actually complete it right then and there. So we can actually tell people, click on the link or go, it'll be on the website or wherever we want to have it, that they can go right now and submit their responses to those questions that we have that we want answers to. And then that way we will see a quick response from the people who are attending the meeting. And that will give you a little bit more feedback from folks that are present, so that you're not just waiting for the 20 people or 30 people that might want to talk at that time, but then you'll get a consensus from all the people that are actually listening in as well.
So you might be able to derive some questions there, saying, some specific questions that we can answer. Yes, that will occur. No, that won't. This is what we're doing. Because I think that's what will clear up some misinformation. Staff, and then we'll also be able to say, no, that's not so what you heard there, Mr. Evans. Paul, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that we can certainly do some live polling potentially in the meeting, because Zoom actually has that. I just want to throw out a word of caution from a data perspective. Obviously, doing a live poll in a town hall meeting, it's not, we can't assume it's representative in any way. It's going to be representative of the people who came to the meeting. So I'm just throwing that out as we can certainly do that. We can do live polling in the meeting, and Zoom has some of that functionality built in as well. But I just wanted to throw out the word of caution about that, the conclusions we draw from that data, I guess.
I'm sorry, Paul. Can I clarify? I didn't mean a live poll. I was saying to have like the Google survey or the form that we're using that we want people to fill out in general, to have it available and to tell people that the link is live right now, that if you want to go and complete the survey, to do it Tuesday night or whatever. So that way we have a lot more people who are aware that the survey is open, that it's available, that they can then respond to. So not just the folks that would be a part of the town hall itself, but anybody who might see it on Facebook or see the link or wherever, they could share it, and then folks could respond, more easily. And then we cut it off, let's say 24 hours later, and say it'll close in 24 hours, something like that.
Perfect. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, can I just say, I had a parent today that asked about, would like to get their child back in school, but the child has asthma. Her question at the time was the availability, when can you take that mask off? So that, those might be some questions that come up at that point in time, or something that's medical. So, in a structured way, the more we can answer within reason after a presentation, it can clarify a lot of things.
Mr. Mayor? One of the things that I was going to ask, are we translating this it'd be interesting in Spanish, because how are we going to do that? And that's important.
Stats, how can Focus Springfield do that?
Okay.
Paul?
I don't actually know, but that's something we can look into to figure out a way to accomplish that.
I have a suggestion, and something that we did in a different district that I was working with. We actually did breakout rooms by language specific, with the translator already in the breakout room, so that as the information was being disseminated, it was live. They were receiving the information in their language, and so people were able to choose which language they felt more comfortable in.
That's great.
My concern about the Google survey that we're talking about is we're really not going to hear from parents.
No.
That could easily be hijacked by a concerted effort by an advocate group. Let's sway this one way or the other by, okay, everybody, here's the link, get on there and fill it out and say this. That's my only concern about doing that. And I don't know if there's any way that we can tell where they come from, where the answers come from.
No, because we're gonna lose out. I know that, and that's my concern from the Latino community. And they need to understand this as well, and we need to, as a school body, to inform them in their own native language. You know what I'm saying?
I think do that, Ms. Perez. I think Assistant Superintendent Lydia Martinez brought that about. I think, town halls, Vice Chair Collins indicated, we want to listen, but I think that there might be at times some question that we can address and we can answer.
But someone needs to, as a presentation,
somebody has to indicate.
We can start working with if you're still listening, Paul, with Focus right away to see if we can get a translator or somehow during that meeting.
Sure.
Can I ask a question or provide a potential resource? I know that, and Maria, I know that you're a New Citizen Council, but I know that there have been other virtual town halls that have been held that they have actual interpreters. I don't know if it's 1199 SEIU, or there are some who have done some around COVID, and they have had people actually interpret for them, and they set it up. I don't know if there's a possibility to be able to partner. Or if Mrs. Martinez knows who led those other rooms, but I've seen it done where they have provided translation services.
Yes, correct, because when I talked with Steve, he said you can put people in other rooms. One of those rooms could be where someone's giving the presentation you know, just with a little lag in Spanish,
Simultaneous.
you know, simultaneous.
That's exactly how it was done in the one that I've already participated with. So the breakout rooms had a live translator in them. They also used the chat feature so that if they had questions, so that no one was able to actually speak, but questions were being read off through the chat feature. And so the translator would hear the person in their native tongue and they would translate into the chat in English so that whoever was responding to the questions had it in English. And so that, and I do know how they did it.
Ms. Perez, that could be the vehicle, Ms. Hurst, that could be the vehicle. Then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Isn't there also the ability to add caption to?
Taylor?
Isn't there also the ability to add caption to the bottom somewhere so that folks who might be hearing impaired could read?
I'd have to ask Focus now, I'm not positive. But I hope you're not upset that I took the day we could get, was Tuesday, because I knew we wanted to do it. We wanted to do it before our Thursday meeting. And it wouldn't wait until after this evening, the time would stop.
Danny, when on the logistics before we move to the last voting item, and we have a voting item. Everybody's good. We're looking at Tuesday at 6 p.m. I think we have we're going to lay it out and get the word out. Thank you, LaTonya. Get the word out, and I'll, Danny, if you could CC Mr. Helmkamp here, so I'll give her a heads up that she could, she could be online to hear with us. So we're good on that. Okay. So the last section 3, the voting item. This is just, we sort of talked about it. This is to approve an amended 2020-2021 school year calendar, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Warwick, please.
So about a week ago, the commissioner finally broke off negotiations with the unions and turned this all over to us. But at that time, they did agree on one thing. They agreed together that they would give us all 10 extra days in addition to whatever normal PD days that we could build into the calendar, and he would count them as student instructional days to give folks time to get everything done that we've been talking about tonight. So I'd be recommending to the committee that we take those 10 days and build them in as extra PD, professional collaboration meetings for staff, so the teams at the schools have time to put all of this together so they have it ready for the students. And so as opposed to our traditional start, which would be August 31 on our traditional calendar, we'd be moving back 2 weeks and starting the 15th. So that would give us the 10 extra planning days in addition to our 5 days. Strong recommendation from the commissioner. And what he said is, you can take the 10 days. I strongly advise you to do it. Not mandating it, but strongly encouraging it. And those days have to be used up front for planning. They can't be put out to another time.
And Desi also ruled, I think that instead of $180, 180 days, 170.
They'll go with 170. Yeah. So they'll count it towards student contact days, towards our requirement. I think it makes a lot of sense for everything we've discussed tonight. The time frame on this is very, very difficult. So it gives us some time to do some extra planning, and we'd have our teachers back to engage in that planning process at every building. So I'd recommend this calendar to you to vote on tonight if you'd like to, and we could at least get that out to the community as the way we'd be opening up.
Thank you, Superintendent Warwick. Any discussion or comments on this? Okay, hearing none. Is there?
I have a question. Sorry.
I didn't see the up there, LaTonya.
Now I have a finger. I have a finger, like ushering out of the church. So my question is, sorry, my children are coming in the house. Be quiet. Sorry. So. So my question is, I see that we have the 15 PD days, and this is probably not specific to the calendar, but will we receive the topics? I know that Stefania mentioned some of those from her presentation that will be covered, but it would be really helpful for me as far as planning and voting on what we choose to do to understand what type of training or professional development is going to be offered over those 15 days.
So we're reworking it now, and we would be glad to get that out to you. So, you know, if the committee were to say, yes, you can have the 10 days, we'll give you a plan on what we would do on the 5 original P days, and then also a plan of collaboration. So we'd be glad to do that.
Okay, I think that's a good question.
May I ask a question? So we're going to vote on this calendar. And if, or depending upon what model we implement, will there be a potential change, or would we need to potentially change, or just stipulate that it will be based on whichever model we implement?
Yeah, that's exactly how we would do it. So we would have these extra 15 days, we'd have a staff together, and we can plan around whatever model we're going to implement, but we'd start implementing for students on the 15th, and we'd actually be able to engage our teachers deeply in that planning process. Structure before that, structured planning time, and the structured PD, like on the unified classroom and Schoology, like Stefania was talking about earlier, all those key issues that we need to get out in planning, and then that collaboration time to plan the kind of lessons that would look different from what we've done in the past, whether it be hybrid, remote, or any other plan. So that would be, we'd lay that out for you. But I think this would work, and we wouldn't have to change it again. We just would have more time to plan it, because it's been a really difficult situation.
And I have to say overall, as we close here, to extraordinary, challenging, and surreal times we're living in. And I mean, and I think everybody has tried to go above and beyond to try to make things happen on it. And are we perfect? No. But you know, you look at nearly 2 million meals being served across the board. I forgot to mention Central High. We're doing the Oasis Food Bank with 3,500 families, where every Friday we're giving full. So I mean, everybody's pitching in on it. So is for Denise's school committee woman, hers question, and school committee woman Naylor's questions been addressed?
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's only questions or comments,
I just add one more thing, and not again related to the calendar, but I should have updated you too on the budget. So the budget is going to be delayed for months. You've probably read about that. So we're not going to have a budget anytime soon either. So we've been trying to engage all this, and we don't even know what our real budget's going to be. So and that's going to continue for a bit.
Just one comment before the vote, because we're liable to have a motion to adjourn immediately after it's been a long meeting. The superintendent is often always quoting that he would put the teaching staff at Springfield up against any teaching staff in the country. I've got to say that about this committee. These are very, very difficult issues that we have to deal with, and we discuss them. We don't always agree. Sometimes we have very strongly held opinions. But unlike most of the other elected bodies I see, we can still work together. We can have the discussion and move on. And this committee is, I would say, probably the best elected body in the state.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate the feedback tonight.
Thumbs up, Latonia? Okay, yeah.
Can I just say, thank you, Chris, for that. I also just want to make sure that we acknowledge, because I know that the superintendent and his team has been working on this. And I can't imagine. These are unprecedented times, and this is all really difficult work. I just think that moving forward, and these are really great conversations, but I do think that moving forward, if we could just really ensure that we are all looped in, I think it would make things a lot easier moving forward, and we could be really supportive to one another around the work that is trying to get done.
A working session, Denise, like a working session. Like
No, I mean, I just
more behind you, not behind you, but you know, more maybe some direct updates.
Yes.
We may change another calendar. We may consider having between now and mid-year, changing some regular school committee meetings to these meetings, these working session, where we get a chance to really talk out things with each other.
Mr. Mayor, before we go, I just want to give thanks to the team because I know they work very hard. I think that the anxiety, from my point of view, is that we have to make the best decision. And right now, we are between education and health. So, and that's the situation that we are charged right now, which I know is a very, very heavy weight for us right now. So, yes, thank you to the team. I know they're trying to put something that it will work for all of us. But yes, at the end, we have to be more inclusive so we could discuss things that the community as a constituents are telling us so we could make the best choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any other questions or comments? If none, is there a motion on the floor? This is the vote on the calendar. So moved. Motion by Vice Chair Collins. Second, please.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hurst. All vote is required, Madam Clerk. Call the roll.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Naylor?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mayor Sarno?
Board of sufficient vote, this matter passes. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Hurst. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Taylor, roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Naylor?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
No, I want to keep going.
Mayor Sarno?
Yes, more than sufficient vote, this matter passes. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for watching, and good health to each and every one of you, your families, and to our viewing public.